Am I not live yet? It says going live. Okay. All right. Okay, looks like I've been live for only a few seconds here. I thought I was already live. But welcome everybody. This is part 4. John Stoltenberg's on Refusing to Be a Man. This one is entitled Activism and Moral Selfhood. And he's put a comma after moral, which I don't quite understand. It's almost as though this is a list, but backwards. Should it be selfhood, moral, and activism? But moral is an adjective. This is, I don't know, quite strange, but he's very stylistic with some of his words and phrases. So perhaps he's just a little bit too high IQ for me, and I'm just missing something. But anyway, this is the final punch of this entire little book here, this little selection of essays. But in case it wasn't recorded earlier, what I was explaining is that with an argument, oftentimes you don't have to jump down someone's throat and dissect every single premise of an argument to refute it. Very often, if the argument's not true, you're going to see it all fall apart at the point where they're making their conclusion. And I think that's very true of all of these essays. We can do a lot of dancing around with his epistemology and the way that he defines and sets up his concepts, right? But all of that, it's very masturbatory, it's very abstract, there's not a lot of meaning behind it necessarily. You really see it all just fucking fall apart once he's really throwing out his conclusions. And this has aged particularly poorly. I think that this section, more so than any other section, resembles the kind of thing that you'd see in the book that I read through on stream last year, which was Women Respond to the Men's Movement. This is very much so in that same kind of sarcastic and sort of dismissive vein. All right, hello workbook. Yes, school is in session. This is my this is me LARPing as a professor, I guess. Of course, no matter what I'm quote-unquote teaching, I'm much more casual. I think that teachers take themselves way too seriously, and that ultimately it's a detriment to education. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. We have feminist activism and male sexual identity. This is for a panel about what direction the men's movement should take. Now, he's put the men's movement in quotes, and you're going to find very quickly he's not going to refer to the actual men's movement that was around, at the time that this would have been published, or I guess it kind of gained a little bit of momentum shortly afterwards. He means a men's movement of men doing shit for women, right? So it's a very traditionalist notion of a men's movement, the kind of thing that, of course, you'll see in quote-unquote radical feminism. And honestly, this essay is worth reading in its entirety because it's that fucking stupid and outrageous. At issue, reproductive freedom. Pregnant women denied dignity, denied integrity, denied a safe home. Now their lives hang in the balance against a gob of cells. Now the superfathers of America say that gob of cells deserves more dignity. That gob of cells has more integrity. That gob of cells has a paramount right to a safe home. Pregnant teenagers, children bearing children, 1 million every year. Now the superfathers of America say, stay chaste or else. Now the superfathers of America say, the paramount right to life resides in your uterus, not in you. Now the superfathers of America say, go knock up your daughters, your stepdaughters, your nieces, go on. That gob of cells has a paramount right to life. As if there was a question what men of conscience should do. So that's the framework we're seeing, right? He's gonna put forth a women's issue, do this like obnoxious, sarcastic poetry about how he thinks men have treated this issue, and then end it with his punchline, as if there was a question what men of conscience should do. So it's a lot of finger waving, a lot of shaming, right? This is very typical. And could you imagine like a men's rights approach that actually took this approach in regards to women? Because you totally could, right? At issue, men's reproductive freedom, right? And then talk about how women were so selfish, they just want to take child support and not have any responsibility for the children that they're claiming sole custody of, etc. And like it would actually like this tone and bitchiness and dismissiveness and level of shaming would actually be appropriate to apply to most women, well, and to most men, frankly, regarding these issues if they were actually focused on the male side of the issue. But he doesn't even see the male issue, right? This is an entire book. This is going on 200 pages of essays regarding masculinity and what it means to be a man and why we should refuse masculinity in general. And at no point does it occur to him that there are issues particular to men. And for the typical feminist, of course, they just dismiss it on the grounds that, of course, men have all the power, and therefore, men who don't have power have absolutely no right to complain because reasons. But I want to talk about this comical equivocation fallacy that this entire thing is based on. So first of all, he's arguing that the only choice for women, if they don't have abortion, is abstinence from sex, which is just not true, and wasn't true for many, many years at the time of this being published. And the irony is that that's the only reproductive right that men have, is abstinence from procreative sex. And this doesn't even occur to him at all. So if women don't have abortion, they have absolutely no reproductive agency beyond abstinence. But then also, there's this idea that if you're not cared for, provided for, given free shit, just completely having a government safety net, the kind that communism promises you, then you're no different than a fetus that can just be terminated at will. And the irony, of course, is that the implication of his argument is that women are as pathetic and stupid and have less agency than a fetus. He's literally comparing women to fetuses, and this is how they're seen and treated. They're pregnant poor women, and of course these pregnant poor women, they just blink into existence with their poverty and their pregnancy. Any question as to what circumstances lead up to that are like completely irrelevant, right? This is a very typical kind of lefty view, is that poverty, it just happens, right? It's like, you catch a cold on a rainy day and poor people just blink into existence because you're not allowed to say any reason. For me to even say, oh, my cold had to do with me walking around in the rain, that's too much. That's too much causality, too much agency. We have to just accept as a fact of reality that poverty just happens and it's completely divorced from any kind of choice or agency at all. So, I don't know if you guys know this, it's fucking stupid. The next one. At issue. Rape. Penetration on demand. Penises engorged with rage. Tender, vulnerable organ. With a little help, it gets hard. With a little help from fists, knives, force, contempt. With a little help from friends. 2-on-1, 3-on-1, 10-on-1. Tender, vulnerable organs. All in wanting fun. Penetration on demand. Surefire, fail-safe proof the guy's a man. As if there was a question what men of conscience should do. So this is how he views rape. Now, of course, we could say, at issue, female perpetrated rape. But of course, to him, it means penetration, right? This is the Mary P. Koss approach to rape. That the identical action, regardless of who's perpetrating it against who, it's always the woman who's the victim. It's always necessarily defined by penetration. Yeah, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, we don't even have this conversation when it comes to men. In fact, it's not even seen as rape. So for this to even be seen as at issue and for it to have been addressed not to his satisfaction, that itself represents privilege. Men don't even have the privilege of sexual violence against them being addressed in a non-satisfactory way, because often it's not even addressed, not even acknowledged as something that exists. Paulo says, so he's just projecting again. Particularly with this, yes. Honestly, the more I read this, the more I just say, I think he's a fucking rapist. I just and like I don't want to just throw that out there glibly, but I'm just gonna throw that out there glibly. He writes about masculinity as though all men are rapists, and he explicitly states throughout this whole thing, throughout all these different essays, that he has to write from his own experience as a man, right? And he uses that as a way to make authoritative claims, and therefore, John Stoltenberg, because he identifies his masculine sexual identity as literally rape, then I don't. What else do you conclude? I think that's a pretty reasonable conclusion. He knows that he's a rapist, and it's going to make him feel better about himself if he says, "Oh no, this was actually a social construction of masculinity that I was duped into." And it's like, you know what, John? Occam's razor says you're just a rapey motherfucker, and that this entire thing is your psychological coping mechanism. Cardi B openly admitted to raping men, not a peep from anyone. Oh yeah, exactly. I made a video about that, but I mean, yeah, I don't count obviously because obviously like not a peep from anyone in the mainstream, not a peep from people in general. Nobody gives a shit about Cardi B openly admitting to raping men. Now you could get pedantic about that. You could say Cardi B didn't personally rape the men. She just like engineered a circumstance that would have the men be raped by others. So if we want to be charitable, right? We'll say she did like a mousetrap style of raping men, as opposed to actually doing it herself, which, you know, is frankly like female hypo agency, female proxy violence at its finest. So we can't take that away from her. But let's see. Okay. The other thing about this particular piece here is he's essentially defining the penis as having two states, which is it's very, very dualistic. Obviously, John Stoltenberg, he's not up and up on his ecofeminism and in his feminist epistemology, such that he would reject the inherent dualism here, mister. I'll wag my finger back at you, you rapey motherfucker. Where penises have two states. One is they're tender and vulnerable and flaccid, and they're like a little boy. They don't know anything. They're so confused. And then when they're hard, they're rapist. Those are the two dynamics. It's a literal baby, and then it's a rapist. And those are the two states of masculinity. And I guess a semi erection, if you're halfway there, you're like, that must be just an absolute conundrum to him, right? That's kind of like, you're starting to get a little bit rapey, but that's like 50% rapey. It's like the percentage of the erection is the percentage of rapiness, apparently. And this is the guy who's going to tell us, first of all, what a man is, and second of all, that it ought to be rejected. At issue, marital rape. The right to rape that comes with the wedding cake. His conjugal right. Her connubial duty. Whenever he gets hungry, he gets his piece of cake. Lips smacking good. She's his piece. Can't say no now. Can't ever say no. She said a permanent yes to one penis forever. Forever is a long time. Forever is any time. Now the legislators of America know a good thing when they see one. Now they see couples by the millions just shacking up, not getting a license, living outside the sacred bondage. No matter, say the legislators, they're passing laws across the land to make the right to rape legal in cohabitation. To make the right to rape legal if she ever said yes once on a date, yes once 3 years ago, yes once just once. A yes to any penis is permanent, say these clever new laws. Extend the marriage contract to the unmarried, to the roommates, to the date. Skip the cake. Get down to the business of devouring female lives. As if there was a question what men of conscience should do. So this is actually probably the most interesting of all of them, because anybody who comes into contact with anything in the manosphere, one of the first things that like MGTOW will warn people about are laws regarding cohabitation, right? That men can get duped into the marriage contract just by being in proximity to a woman. And constantly, people in the men's rights movement, people in the manosphere, people in MGTOW, all over, like PUAs even, maybe not the PUAs so much. They're not necessarily on the up and up, but I'm sure they know the risk of like, hey, if you keep the bitch around, she's gonna be able to ensnare you into like a pseudo marriage. And Diana Davison did a great video in her series responding to Elizabeth Sheehy, where like one of the cases was a woman who had like the absolute thinnest argument based on being a roommate and was able to exploit all of those laws to, I don't know if she got away with like fucking almost murder or assault or something just like absolutely ludicrous. So this is actually a point where we should just nod and pretend and really lean into this argument and say, you know what, we definitely need to get rid of marriage laws, and we definitely need to get rid of cohabitation laws, because absolutely the reason those things are bad is because it just makes rape legal. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you live near a woman for a couple of weeks and it counts as a marriage, you're just allowed to rape her. All but for feminist activism against marital rape. You know, it's not as though rape was always illegal. It's not as though assault was always illegal, right? And of course, the reciprocal to this, this idea that, like if you marry someone, there's sort of like a duty, in a way, right, to continue having sex with them. It is kind of the point, right? That if you're in a society that's monotonous and you wait for marriage, and then marriage has like a function in society in terms of procreation, that would be reciprocal to all of the benefits you expect from a marriage, which is, you know, that like your husband has to pay for your shit and, you know, keep you well fed and clothed and warm. The basic like Maslow bottom of the fucking pyramid, you just get granted to you, right? But of course, you know, there's that would be the reciprocal here, right? Is that you'd be contrasting, oh, I have to satisfy my husband anytime he wants to, and that makes me so oppressed. Whereas the reciprocal to that for a man is like, you're literally a slave. And this is why my new thing, my new hot take as a quote unquote radical men's rights quote unquote advocate is to say, you know what? Men under traditionalism, men under patriarchy are at best house Negroes. And should a man be an incel, he's like the field Negro. And we're going to see that proportion shift over time. And I wonder what percentage it's going to take for men to kind of realize that they're on a fucking plantation. And these traditionalist men who like still are able to get married and have this sort of traditional lifestyle, they're the house Negroes. They're still oppressed, but they're willing to throw the other blacks, the other men, under the bus, because, you know, they get their pee-pee touched, and that's good enough for them. Korea Man says, "Hail to the President, Orange Man." Are you referring to the recent news about him scaling back some of Obama's just absolute fucking bullshit regarding trannies? Because I 1000% agree with that. I wish that he would do it in a much more aggressive way. But I saw fucking Shoe on Head simping all over Twitter, like, oh my god, I assured all of my gay friends that Donald Blumpf wasn't gonna hurt gay rights, and look at this headline. And if she had read the fucking article, she'd know that it has like absolutely no practical effect whatsoever, and it's all just a bunch of hysteria. But you know, she's a fucking she's like a Boxy clone that like somehow is dumber. God, I can't fucking stand her. John Stoltenberg didn't believe Andrea Dworkin when she claimed to be gang raped in France. Did he not believe her? I mean, I wouldn't believe her. My favorite thing is, like, after all of that happened, a lot of feminists were clutching their pearls over somebody saying, oh my god, people didn't believe Andrea Dworkin was raped. They said, who would rape Andrea? And, like, it's like, that's literally, like, what everyone is thinking. Like, no, nobody would rape her. It's just, no. Like, that's just, yeah. I feel like Andrea Dworkin knew that people would say that and that she could then claim victimhood that way, right? So either they believe she was raped, in which case she gets to be, a rape victim and have all of that victim credit. But then otherwise, when people say, I'm not sure, if they ask too many questions, she'll be like, is it because I'm fat and ugly? You're shaming me for being fat and ugly. Then she gets to have her victimhood cake that way, right? So it's like win-win. Like if you're a fat, ugly chick, definitely 100% of the time, just like claim to have been falsely raped, right? Dworkin said he didn't believe her. He probably didn't listen and believe her. I don't know. I feel like because Stoltenberg is her gay bestie, right? And I feel like in a proper fag hag relationship, like there's a point where you're gonna check the other person's bullshit, right? If there's any functionality to that relationship whatsoever, and I want to believe there was. I want to believe that, as awful as these people are, that the one thing that they had that was like pure and true and genuine was their fag haggatry. And that's why John was kind of like looking at her like, Andrea, come on. Like, are you really gonna say this? Are you really gonna expect people to believe you were raped, right? Like in private, in the softest, kindest way, trying to kind of tease out of her, like, look, man, I respect your work. I think you're very intellectually gifted. I want us to continue our work together. I think this is all really great, right? You're the love of my life, etc., etc. This rape accusation is ludicrous, and people are gonna think it's ludicrous, and you should think about the implications of you claiming that you're raped, right? Like, I feel like he really tried in, like, the most sensitive way possible. Who knows? I can only speculate as to what that conversation was. I'm sure that he never publicly stated the bitch is lying. I'm sure he, as kindly as possible, tried to suggest to her that what she is claiming is completely fucking ridiculous and, like, nobody's gonna believe it. I don't know. Or maybe he just didn't listen and believe hard enough. Anyway. At issue, battery. She walked into a door. She fell down some stairs doing the laundry. Her dark glasses are prescription. She limps from a slight sprain. She went to the hospital to visit a friend. Her screaming was all in fun. It was laughing, hysterical laughing. You know how women are. Fashions change. The look today is abused. Clothing that looks slit by a knife. Faces made up like flesh bruised from beating. Around the haunted, deep-set eyes, black and blue. On the temples and cheekbones, purplish magenta welts. Bruised on or beaten on, in a patch the size of a fist. Broken blood vessels pancaked over. It takes a lot of pancake to cover damaged goods. Check out the street. The abused look is in. Men like their women beautiful. They see beauty in women's pain. Go to your corner drugstore. Check it out. Get your personal bruise kit in the latest, chicest shades. Or just go home. The beauty of pain is within the reach of every woman, within a man's reach. As if there was a question what men of conscience should do. So this entire thing falls apart for a very obvious reason. And I'll give you a second to try to guess what that extremely obvious reason this is retarded is. Actually, there's two. Number one, what I think is the most obvious one, because he's making this, like, I don't know why he's linking this to cosmetics. It's just, like, ludicrous. But, men don't give a fuck about women's makeups or fashion or anything. Like, they literally give zero shits. Everybody knows this. Women dress for other women. So if this were true, if there were any truth to this idea that cosmetics or fashion in any way are, like, set up to explain away the signs of physical abuse, that would be because women like that aesthetic. Now, I don't think he's saying that literally, but that just jumps out to me as, like, immediately obviously stupid about this. And of course, the other issue is domestic violence, which he has a whole speech on later on in this. Is that if you have any sort of standard that's based on the conflict tactics scales, the CTS, you find it, the gender parity in domestic violence, and that, when you have your non-reciprocal violence, it's like some ludicrous percentage, like 70% are female perpetrated. But of course, it's only a one-way street. But I guess I'll try to be a little bit. I'm going to try to steel man this, right? So the argument is that we can see the signs and the reality of men just beating the shit out of women all the time with impunity and with no consequences, and that we explain this away in a way that's as casual and glib and everyday as just the makeup that women wear, and that we'll use this as an excuse. So I'm wondering, is he saying that feminization itself, or standards for female beauty, or standards for female behavior in general even, are all designed to mask an underlying current of constant threats of male violence? To me, that would be the strongest way to defend this take here. And I guess I would counter that with suggesting that perhaps the way that we view masculinity is entirely designed to cover a constant demand on them to sacrifice themselves to care for and to protect women. And this is why, John Stoltenberg, you can write this article, you can write all these stupid fucking essays about how masculinity itself is evil and must be deconstructed, and you didn't suffer anything for it. In fact, he was rewarded for it. And I'm a bit skeptical that, we live in this world as he's depicting it, if he wasn't just totally fucking lynched for writing this kind of hateful, bigoted garbage. And frankly, he targeted the one class of people, the one group of people who you're just allowed to make these kinds of claims about and still be respected, still be invited to give your stupid lectures and still be published and still be a person with a fucking YouTube channel. Because you couldn't argue, for example, oh, you know what? Blackness isn't real, right? Blackness is socially constructed. And, we just have a society that's built to just, make blackness perpetrate rape and constant violence all the time. But don't worry, blacks. You need to just reject that part of society that's telling you to be black, and then you can be white. This is literally what he's saying about men. He's saying it's all socially constructed, it's just rape all the way down, and you can just stop being a rapist if you completely reject this concept of needing masculinity. It's imagine a gender flipped version of this, or a race flipped version of this, is literally uglier than Mein Kampf. It's uglier than Martin Luther's little essay about how the Jews lie about everything. It's uglier than any racist, anti-Semitic, misogynist thing ever written. And it's just so comically obvious that that's the case. And if we really live in a patriarchy, why is it the case that you can just take these fucking pot shots at men and without having any consequences whatsoever? Not that he should. I think it's fine. I don't care if he wants to say these things, because it's just so obviously fucking retarded that I'm not offended by it. But on the same token, I want to expose it. But my point is, I want equal standards. I want us to be able to say things that are this ugly about literally any group, so that it can all be laid bare and can all be deconstructed, analyzed, taken in whatever direction, because that's the only way to have discourse. And I don't know, this is some good discourse here, I guess. But yeah, this one was a little bit bizarre. This one's a little bit spicy. At issue, child sexual assault. They calculate the age at which the diameter of a child's vagina can accommodate a grown man's penis. They think it's 8. Or they don't bother to calculate. The infants go to the hospital with gonorrhea down their throats. They pick up children and drug them. When the children are passed out, they get it on. Or they pick up children and keep them conscious. They photograph them, being pissed on perhaps, or spread open, poor and pimply, in Polaroid. They pressure their daughters and nieces and stepdaughters and little sisters into secret sexual intimacies. Simon says, diddle diddle dumpling. Little Miss Muffin. Simon says, Red Rover, wants to come over and over. And they make the girls promise not to tell. The girls keep the promise. They grow up unable to speak. As if there was a question what men of conscience should do. This is funny too. Like this constance is in here. I don't think this is a word. Constance. Yeah, that's not a condense. As if men of condensation. There's a question what they should do. I guess they should just become rain. Constance. How do you even fuck that up? He typed a D instead of CI. That's not even a typo. That's just like a seizure. Anyway, so the obvious thing about this is, what about boys? You know, I think I saw an AVFM article that was going over some of the stats, and it was something like there's really not that much gender asymmetry in child abuse. And it seemed that what they had done is they broke down the categories regarding like rape, sexual assault, molestation, in such a way that they could isolate and make it look like it was little girls being disproportionately affected. But then if you actually look at the whole picture, not only are little boys like more likely to endure physical violence, but they're also more likely to endure sexual violence. I guess I can find that article too. But I mean, I don't know. Like, how much evidence do I really need to see to be sold on the idea that people who target children, like the perpetrators probably have a preference one way or another, but that statistically, a lot of the male little boy victims are being erased, just as he's doing here, which is kind of ironic, right? This argument that, how dare you not care about little girls being raped, when this entire thing is him completely ignoring, completely not caring about little boys being abused. And I guess that's all I'm going to say about that part of it. I don't want to dwell on it because it's so gross. At issue, pornography. To go back to fucking porn. I thought we were done with this. The ropes cutting into her breast give him pleasure. The gag stuffed into her mouth makes him feel full to bursting. The black leather hood over her face makes him feel radiant, hot. The chains around her ankles and wrists make him feel strong, like an ox ready to gore. The pincers ripping her nipples make his penis swell. The way she spreads her labia makes him feel like fucking her raw. He imagines her. He has her. He uses her. He possesses her. As if there was a question what men of conscience should do. So yeah, I don't know, I feel like a lot of this porn shit has already been addressed, but I mean, the obvious counterexample is, what about like femdom shit? Does he think that fetish, that approach to this sort of like sadomasochistic sex is like in like a ridiculous minority? Because I don't think it is. I think that when it comes to sadomasochism, it's a lot of men who want to be on the bottom, right? And then what does that say about the women? You know, are they somehow being coerced somehow when they have all the power? Right? But whatever. One thing that's interesting to note is he did take a moment here to stop and say he imagines her, right? Because he did a whole like psychoanalysis on the importance of that and how it links into alienization during sex. Which actually, regarding that, he does have a point. Like somebody who's addicted to porn or needs porn to get off, they are doing that, and he is, I think, correct in that analysis insofar as it's true of a person that's addicted to porn. He's completely fucking wrong when he thinks this is all of porn and thinks this is everybody who looks at porn at all. What he mostly criticizes in that part 3 or would be a porn addict, and in particular someone who's addicted to a specific subset of specifically violent porn. So it's like, multiple layers removed, and then trying to pretend this like specialized niche of pornography is somehow like illustrating the norm of the whole thing. Anyway, so those were his little poems where he dramatically recontextualizes these women's issues and suggests, here these are the questions, right? And if we have a men's movement that's focused on women, how is there any question or any debate or any nuance regarding these things, right? How? Let's see. What men of conscience will be doing in the next decade. This part's even more like gay bitchy. I hate it. Excuse me. But what's so funny about this part is, this is him chastising his gaggle of feminist soy boy men, right? And using this sort of this sort of like shaming language, which is something that, hint, hint, you can direct this shaming language at men to get what you want because men have a conscience and men care about other people. And that's why shaming tactics work. And that's why it doesn't work on women. Prediction. Many men of conscience will do very little or nothing. Prediction. Many men of conscience will prefer to discuss their feelings. I have to stop right here. This is literally the one thing feminists claim, right? Whenever you say, hey, feminists have done nothing, they've done absolutely nothing to help men and boys, they say, we encourage men to discuss their feelings, right? They act like that's a fucking magic bullet. Like, it should be a cartoon, right? You have like a fucking homeless man, a homeless veteran with PTSD, lost all his marbles, lost all his everything, living under a bridge. He's got like 2 out of 4 limbs left, absolutely bonkers because of real shit. And then a feminist comes up to him and says, hey, have you considered your feelings? Have you considered what you're doing for little girls who are raped? Have you considered what else you could do for women who are catcalled in the street? You should think about your feelings. Have you thought about your feminine side? Because I know that you're missing an arm and a leg, but have you got in touch with your inner vagina? Because I think that maybe right now it looks like you got 1 leg, but you got 2 because you still have a penis. And I think that maybe had you been, in contact with your feelings, then, you wouldn't be like screaming in the night and sleeping under a bridge and like smelly and gross. Right? That's feminism. That's literally feminism. That is not a straw man. That is 100% every single feminist throughout all of history, no exceptions. That is 100% of all feminists. They're literally that cartoon that I just described. And now he's going to say, oh, look at you men getting in touch with your feelings. Fuck you. Do more. Right? He is the fucking queen. He is the queen bee church lady. Absolutely. God, I fucking wish I had gotten to reading through this when Prince was still around. Because he would have fucking hated this more than anyone. He'd be gone for like a third of it just because of smoke breaks. He'd be like, I can't even. I'm listening, but I'm gonna go outside and smoke a cigarette because I just can't. Constantly. He'd have fucking died of cancer if we had read through this whole thing with him there. They've been like, no thanks. He'd have made a fucking Kickstarter to buy like a carton of cigarettes because he'd have needed it. Prediction. Many men of conscience will do only that which makes them feel better about themselves. If something does not make them feel better about themselves, they will be unlikely to do it. Discussing their feelings will make them feel better about themselves. Now, that one, I think is actually kind of true, but that's true of people in general, right? Like, I don't think that's particular to men, certainly. But this is the first of a number of these predictions where you're going to notice a theme. he's going to start to realize things about male feminism, and he's going to get so close. And then, at the last minute, he fucks it up. I guess he should have, if he had written this after the age of RuPaul, he would have taken that to heart. RuPaul's timeless advice: don't fuck it up. And that's the advice he needs when he's doing his masculine deconstruction from a radical feminist perspective. He gets to the last bit of it. He's almost there. He's almost realizing this is the way people are, and he fucks it up. But before I get to the actual conclusion there's a prediction that better illustrates that. This one's long and stupid. Prediction. Many men of conscience, if they notice they are doing nothing, will want to spend hours and hours struggling with the question of what is politically correct for them to do as men. As men, the two most paralyzing words in the vocabulary of the so-called man of conscience. He won't do anything until it is clear to him how it affects him and his brethren as men. He won't do anything unless it is clear to him in what sense he can do it with other men as men. Unless their action particularly matters because they are doing it as men. Unless the action makes them all feel much better about themselves as men. As men. Words to live by. Words to do nothing by. So, okay. The whole fucking point of, like, political standpoint theory, right? This whole critical analysis, this Marxist fucking garbage is that, we don't have reality, we don't have truth, we don't have a standpoint, we don't have knowledge of anything unless we consider from whose perspective it is, right? It's this very, very hardcore semi-individualist, it's collectivist, but when you look at individual characteristics, individualist in the sense of an individualist epistemology, that they have these immutable characteristics, right? And these all must be considered, right? If you are a black woman and you write a sci-fi novel, it's necessarily coming packaged with blackness and with femininity, right? If you see something, if you're gay, you don't just see it, you gay see it, right? This stupid Marxist narrative of intersectionality and of considering your place and whether or not it's appropriate for you to do or say things and whether or not you're being privileged and to check your privilege, right? So then when these feminist men take this seriously and then say, okay, like when I'm approaching these issues, I have to remember that I'm a man, and if these are women's issues, I have to make sure that I'm listening to what the women say, and I have to be sensitive to that, and I have to be sensitive to the fact that I'm a masculine person, and that as a male, I'm going to have these assumptions, and what are those assumptions, and am I going to know what those assumptions are? If I'm a man, I need a woman to tell me, or a gay man maybe, or a lesbian, or a black lesbian, ideally, especially if she's in a fucking wheelchair, right? They're doing the fucking things that are asked of them, and he's saying, oh, now you're gonna sit there? Why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you doing enough? Why are you sitting there asking as men? Why are you sitting there taking all this seriously? Why are you sitting there considering your standpoint as men? You're just having your analysis paralysis. Blah, 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 blah. It's like you can't fucking win. You can't win. He's saying, man, how come you're not just jumping in there and just fucking doing it? How come you're sitting there and having this, like, dilemma over all of my Marxist garbage and postmodern bullshit that I made you consider? It's like, no fucking shit. Of course they're gonna sit there and have analysis paralysis. You literally told them that, like, a square is not a square because maybe they're sneaking a penis into it that they don't know about because it's a conceptual fucking societal penis that's invisible and intangible and fucking tranny lesbian wheelchair war veteran has to explain it to you. It's just like duh, right? It's like so fucking ludicrous. But of course, since he's lampooning like male feminists, I don't care. Like, to me, like, yeah, fucking feed him to the fucking gay wolves. Like, let this annoying sassy homosexual just let them deal with it. Like, they deserve this kind of condescension and lecturing and bitchiness because it's what they fucking asked for. They probably enjoy it. Anyway. Prediction. Many men of conscience, if they notice they are doing nothing, will want to spend hours and hours justifying their inertia. Oh, that's what I just did, right? See, I just demonstrated that. I just justified their inertia for them. So, obviously, he's right about everything. They are waiting for women's leadership, they may say. They don't want to do anything rash. They want it all spelled out for them exactly, step by step. and they have not yet received precise instructions from the Central Feminist Organizing Committee. All women have to do is ask, they may say. All women have to do is hold their hand, is what they mean. Which is just fucking ridiculous. When you look at government, when you look at feminism, when you look at everything that they've done, like, all of society, all of traditionalism, all of patriarchy, all of the civil rights movement, all of everything, all of the women's rights movement, it was perpetrated by men. It was women making demands and men decisively, quickly, efficiently giving women exactly what the fuck they ask for the moment they ask for it, right? When we're asking the question, should women vote? Men are sitting there saying, well, no, like a lot of women are saying they don't want to vote and we don't want to give them the vote if there's going to be a problem with it. And then somebody says, well, why don't we just give women the vote without any fucking responsibilities whatsoever? And then the men are like, oh, that's a great way to get my pee-pee touched. Just give women shit and don't give them any responsibility. Yeah, great. Lather, rinse, and repeat. And there's your fucking women's movement. Literally, this is like 50 fucking years of men giving women shit for no reason, with zero responsibility, constantly, time and time again. And all they're doing, their entire feminist fucking analysis, is to try to calculate what it is women want most and then to give it to them. And that's all they're doing. And he's sitting there saying, well, how come rape still happens in a society? How come a single black woman is ever poor in a society? Fuck you. Fuck you. Alright, it's just like, just this fucking obnoxious gay fucking harpy. Just saying, well, how come you haven't done more for women? How come women aren't more privileged yet? What are you doing? Wake up. How come you're being so inert? It's just absolutely just toxic and awful. I found the toxic masculinity, guys. It's fucking Stoltenberg's gay bitchiness. Ugh. Prediction. Many men of conscience will spend more time shopping for tofu than they spend reading the feminist press. Yeah, because feminism is fucking garbage. I will say this, though. I don't buy tofu. I have spent more time reading feminist garbage than shopping for tofu. So, here's your fucking exception. I'm actually reading it. There you go. I am the men of most conscience, it turns out. I'm better than your fucking feminist men. And so are you, because I'm subjecting you to this. You, likewise, are probably spending more time dealing with his feminist garbage than with shopping for tofu. And by this standard, we're more enlightened and egalitarian than all of his feminist friends, so-called friends, his feminist things he's using. Prediction. Many men of conscience will turn out for one feminist demonstration every 12 months. They will raise their voices and shout. They will shout louder, in fact, than all the women combined. They will even get into a scuffle with some other men. Any other men. Hostile bystanders, the police. They will make a noble scene. They will stage a cockfight. Then, they will go home and try to get in touch with their feelings for another year. Okay, that one's actually true. That's actually 100% true. This is, again, we're getting really, really close. We're getting close to him understanding the reality of male feminism. But he thinks that there's nothing biological, nothing ingrained from an evolutionary perspective at all in that. Because he can't analyze it from that perspective. Because the moment he does, he's going to realize a lot of like immediately glaringly obvious things. Like, oh, it looks like eggs are the limiting factor in reproduction. And therefore, men are held to a standard that requires them to produce and provide for women. Otherwise, they get eliminated from the gene pool. And this has, over generations, had an impact in the way that men act. It's such that it prefers men who do things and make these stances in order to get their pee-pee touched by women, right? Like, it's just, like, so obvious the moment you, like, start to see the first fucking thing. Like, the whole thread of it is so obvious. But he can't see that. It has to be socially constructed. Therefore, it's, oh, men are engaging in a performative masculine identity, and therefore they're making these things look loud and aggressive and putting it into a context of a fight, and it's not constructive enough. And it's like, these fucking demonstrations and protests, the point of them is to be loud and to say your stupid slogans and to make a scene and to have your numbers, which is what he's fucking described here. But no, that's not good enough, you know. And had they not done this, of course, he'd be saying, well, men, how come you like to fight all the time, but you don't start any cockfights at the women's march, huh? 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 You know, because again, there's no fucking winning with this asshole. Many men of conscience will ally themselves publicly with a woman or feminist credentials. They may be friends or lovers, heterosexual or homosexual, married or single, living together or apart. It doesn't matter. What matters is their public alliance. She will provide him with with credentials of his own. A plastic laminated wallet card that says, I have been approved by a feminist woman, and it will have on it her good name. He will flash the card when it suits him. He will keep it in his pocket when he buys pornography. When he visits her home, he will leave a mess. Right? So, it's just... like, okay, if a man reads feminist literature and thinks, oh, this is valuable, this is good, this makes a lot of sense, now there's an accusation that, oh, you're just using her name, right, in order to gain a credential yourself. And it's like, if men socialize with other men, that's patriarchy. If men socialize with women in their cause, it's like this sexist nepotism, right? And it's... and then again, we have this issue where it's like, okay, if a woman perceives that a man is doing that, she could publicly disavow them and say, stop throwing my fucking name around just because I said I liked one thing you did or whatever, just because we did something or had some like demonstration or speech or whatever that we worked on together or some project. Just because that doesn't mean I greenlight everything you say. Here's something that I disagree. Like, he doesn't view women as capable of standing up and making that claim, right? Because again, it's women as objects and men as the sole agents. And if men aren't living a life that's like a perfect Jesus standard of dedication only to women, then they have no right to like exalt or align themselves or be publicly approved of by any other women. And it's another example of like he's finding a way to be offended on behalf of people who aren't even expressing a concern necessarily, because he just sees women as fetuses, and fetuses can't talk. What's going on in chat? Why isn't True Vada called false Vada? Prince made a video about that, and the whole True Vada whore hashtag. Which, yeah, I think that's a bad idea. I think that the idea that, like, you're gonna take a drug and then, like, not care about getting HIV... it's like you're gonna like do a bunch of things that can risk you getting HIV, and you're literally going to stake being defended from it on just some drug you take that's like new, you know, like absolutely stupid. Cancer Skrillex? Oh, you mean AIDS Skrillex? Yeah, AIDS Skrillex is definitely one of these men he's referring to. And yeah, the performative male fight would be homoerotic because war is homoerotic. It's all about who has the biggest penis, and the penis is a deterrent. And that's why rockets are shaped like penises. It has nothing to do with the aerodynamics or with like the function of them. They're just like shaped like a penis because it's a display. George Floyd's acting was on the Habib show? You mean his porn? I mean, I'm not interested in seeing his porn. I don't think George Floyd is very attractive. I guess it's not my type. Did he do acting that wasn't porn? Because that'd be kind of funny. I don't know. Most male feminists go along with the narrative in hope of getting the PP touched. Yeah, exactly. That's what it all boils down to. And like there are people within the manosphere who like they hate that. Like they hate it when other people say, "Oh, men are just doing this for that." They want to pretend that like male action and male agency is somehow like more like more virtuous. And it's a lot of these like tradcon complementarianist kind of people, and honestly, it's not. Like, the one thing feminists gets right is it's like, yeah, men are thinking with their dicks, and it's fucking pathetic. And it's not pathetic because it leads to men, like, being rapists or wife batterers or whatever. It's pathetic because it makes them fucking simps. You know, for every rapist, you got 100 or 200 or 1,000 fucking simps. And frankly, if I was, like, looking at that panel in the stupid memes, and one of them was, like, end all rape, and the other one was, like, end all simping, I wouldn't even think about it. I would end the simping immediately. There's like absolutely no question that like simping is like the greater detriment to humanity, like by a wide fucking margin. In fact, if the button was like make rape 10 times more prevalent but end simping, like 1000% still pressing the simp button. Like there's just not even a fucking comparison. Like we need to be talking about simping more often. It needs to be like shamed publicly in a much more aggressive manner. Like that stupid boomer girl who was like, simping is king shit. Like that should be grounds for summary execution. I just that like denying the Holocaust is illegal. Saying anything good or positive about simping should be illegal first. And it should carry like quadruple, quintuple, like 100 times the fucking the punishment. Yeah, that's my take. Simping has like 6 gorillion deaths. That's my stance. I stand by that. Let me see. What's the next fucking thing here? Prediction. Many men of conscience, when their wife says goodbye, when their live-in maid says clean your own piss around the toilet, when their politically astute feminist comradine in arms. Is that supposed to be like comrade but maiden? Comrade in there's not a space there. It's comrade in arms. Anyway, when their politically astute feminist comrade in arms says, I no longer trust you, and stops wanting to hang out together, when their personal conduit to feminist consciousness leaves them, many men of conscience will become less and less like men of conscience, and more like ordinary men. They will turn their attention to political issues that don't blatantly remind them of the fact that men like themselves oppress women like her. Nuclear energy, wars in foreign lands, food co-ops. Is that co-ops or coops? Co-ops. Coops isn't a word there. Food co-ops, rent strikes, important issues, not unimportant issues. It's just that they're better than alcohol or drugs when your heart is broken and you want it to harden. Anyway, so it's just saying, men only want their pee-pee touched the moment women aren't interested in their feminism or criticize them too harshly, then they're going to stop being feminist. Which, yeah, maybe consider the actual reasons for that and that it has nothing to do with your fucking retarded psychobabble. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else to add on to that stupid part here. So yeah, his predictions, there is a grain of truth to it. He's just not linking it to anything in truth. Some questions often asked about feminist activism and male sexual identity. Question. If it's true that men are the doers and agents of history, the performers, the active ones, how come men are so passive? Question. Can a man have a feminist consciousness if he doesn't consistently act on it? Question. Can high consciousness exist in a man who is more or less inert? How high can consciousness go before the fact that it exists in a lump between a political embarrassment to the lump? Exists in a lump becomes a political embarrassment to the lump. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Like lump as in it's not enough of it, it's a high consciousness, so therefore it's small, and is that not in itself a political embarrassment to it? That seems retarded. Does he mean like a dick? Is this a dick joke? I don't know, am I retarded? I'm going to copy this and put it in the chat. Can somebody give me their translation of this? I'm actually retarded and I don't fucking know what he's even trying to say here. And yes, space elevators and mine shafts are clearly homoerotic. This comment though, as long as I've stopped, they're not passive though. Like, men have been part of this feminist movement forever. Like, they've been the actors in it. They've been the ones making it all happen. All women had to do was just make demands, and men immediately set forth, giving women every fucking thing they've ever asked for. So he's defining men as passive for not having done enough. How do you ever win? How does he know? Like what's the, what is he even comparing this to? I feel like of all the timelines, we're in a very highly gynocentric one. I find it hard to believe that there are other timelines that are more gynocentric where men would not be considered passive by his fucking standards. Anyway, next question. Is there a way to seem to be a man of fine feminist manners when you're trying to impress people to whom it matters, while at the same time keeping open your options to hobnob with woman haters? So this goes back to, again, if men have interactions with other men, it's a part of a patriarchal conspiracy, right? Question. Which of the following is the most convincing pretext for not doing anything about sexist injustice? A. Self-hatred. B. Guilt. C. More pressing political priorities. Or D. Can't you see I'm trying? Are some women more taken in by some pretext than by others? How can I tell the difference? Where can I meet the women who are easy? Question. If men are so evil, what's the use? Answer. Was that pretext E? So this one, it's really confusing if you try to listen to like the audio that I uploaded on my BitChute. He's implying, if men are so evil, what's the use? And suggesting that's pretext E, which would be the convincing pretext for not doing anything about sexist injustice. And frankly, this is another point where I guess we have a little bit of a feminist, anti-feminist horseshoe theory, where I will suggest, quite controversially, that, yeah, perhaps men are evil, because how else do I explain sexist injustice against men, right? Like, how do we live in this reality where men's issues have been so neglected and where it's so trivialized and completely thrown out, and, not only do people like laugh it off and say it's stupid, but even people who are like pro-patriarchy, even people who are like traditionalist or conservative, will suggest that what people in the men's rights movement are doing will lead to the demise of humanity, right? We don't see anything like that kind of rhetoric, at least on a large scale, at least not outside of like MGTOW circles, suggesting such a thing regarding feminism or gynocentrism. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, like to me, pretext E is pretty fucking convincing in regards to men's issues. Hello, Jen, nice to see you. Okay, so next question. Don't we first have to work out some serious and personal questions about when and how and whether we're going to have sex? I mean, what's in this for me and my penis? So again, he's so close. He's so close to getting it. He's so close to having some understanding, in particular about male feminism, but he's not quite there. It's just swing and a miss. He's at fucking step 9 out of 10 and he fucks it up at the last moment, which is, I think, charitable. I think maybe giving him 9 out of 10 is charitable. Question. What happens when a man takes feminism utterly seriously in every area of his life, in every moment of everything he does? Does he still stay a man, or does he turn into something else? Question. Why is it so difficult to hold on to my sense of maleness in the company of women? Why does being in large groups of mostly women protesting sexist injustice make me feel like shit? Why do I need a gaggle of men around me to feel better? Why is it so difficult to get a gaggle of men to clear their calendars so they can gather around me and help me feel better? Does penis size matter? Am I getting off the subject? What is the subject? Answer. Feminist activism and male sexual identity. So the funny thing about this is one where you can actually do a gender flip, and it illuminates a little how like unfair this is, right? we have these women's groups, right, that, where women come together and women have other female voices, and they say, oh, it's nice to have a space where it's only other women and I don't feel judged and I don't feel like I'm being watched by men, and women have issues similar to me and we can talk about those experiences, and it's nice to have that kind of camaraderie, right? Like we totally get that. Nobody has an issue with that. That's all fine and good or whatever. But the suggestion that men have a similar need, it's like, oh, what are you hiding from? Right? Why aren't you continuing to protest all the things that we're saying that you as a class are responsible for and that we're blaming you for? Why does that make you feel like shit? Fuck you for feeling like shit. Right? Like, this is just, it's hashtag emotional intelligence, just like off the fucking charts. And I do want to say this too. This is something that I've kind of been wanting to make a proper video about, but I'm not sure how to address it because it's actually a serious issue, but it's like hysterically funny also. And I feel like I have to address it in a way that's not funny at all, which is penis size. I honestly think there should be a movement of men who have below average penis sizes rising up and saying, you know what, like, I got a micro penis, I got a small penis, and it's my penis, and I'm fine with it. And fuck you for making fun of me and for shaming me for it, because I can't do anything about it, right? Like, that should be one of the issues with the body positive movement. And this idea that we ridicule men for having a small penis, it's terrible. Like, we don't treat anyone else that way. And, like, that's why, like, I don't think it's appropriate to joke about that. I think it's actually, like, I'm gonna fucking church lady and fucking Karen at people. Yeah, rise up, but not that high. Exactly. Rise up just a little bit. Rise up, to the tippy top you can go, and that's fine. It's just like when kids are measuring their height, you don't shame them for not being 6 feet when they're 10 years old, And it's like, you celebrate whatever you're at. And you know what? Maybe we need to be shaming the big penis people. But I think part of the issue, too, is that, like, if I make a video and I'm like, hey, we need to talk about body positivity and not shaming men with small penises because there's not anything they can do about that. And, it's not the size of the boat. It's the motion of the ocean. Like, that, there's truth to that, right? Like, there's no reason to, like, fetishize, like, massive big dicks. It doesn't necessarily mean better sex. It's like there's no reason to. But then immediately they're going to say, oh, you have a small penis. And, like, now I'm at a catch-22, right? Because either I say yes, in which case nobody's thinking about the actual issues. They're just thinking about my dick. Or I say, actually, no, like, here's what it actually is. I can prove it. Right? And then people are saying, oh, well, now you're just bragging and now you're just doing that to try to, you're just validating the whole standard of larger penises being preferred or whatever. And it's like, so you can't fucking win all the time. And it's just fucking stupid. Anyway. So Stoltenberg is very emotionally intelligent and very, 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 very woke on all of these gendered issues, but even he can't resist, a thinly veiled dick-sized joke. Anyway, the last question he has here is, question, how can I always know I am male and not female and not in between? How can I always know I belong to the male sex and not the other one? How can I always want there to be a male sex to belong to? How can I know it's always okay to belong to it? How can I always feel good about myself as a man and feel truly male at the same time? How can I always enjoy the company of other men? How do you expect me to identify with women's struggle for justice? Don't you see that my aloofness is politically necessary? Don't you see that gender injustice is necessary so I can feel good as a man? Don't you see that sexism is necessary so I can have a sex? So this last question, it comes off as the most bizarre, but if you listen to the first part of this, you'll know what he's getting at. And basically, his treatment of masculinity is entirely socially constructed, right? And that's you have to remember that the entire time. When he's saying refusing to be a man, his suggestion is that both male and female are not real. They are socially constructed. Oh, he'll say they're real but not based in truth. That's a distinction he'll highlight later on, which is a fascinating distinction. I'm like looking forward to getting into that. It actually comes from Dworkin. But so you have the socially constructed identity, and he wants to get rid of male and female in that regard, and then have everybody be gender fluid, essentially. And his argument is that essentially everything bad and negative and awful about humanity, all of the aggression, all of the rape, all of the battering, it all comes from the male identity, all of the domination, right? And he thinks that this, of course, is linked to capitalism. It's linked to acquiring property. It's linked to everything. It's linked to all of the ways that society has perpetuated itself throughout human history. And he literally thinks that none of this is natural to humans. He thinks that all of it is a social conspiratorial construction from the top down that at some point people figured out in ancient history and then has required this tremendous amount of subversion and effort and propaganda in order to replicate itself throughout all of human history across all time and cultures. So that's his narrative. Like that's what we're looking at. You are a male because you have a penis. No, Paulo. Fuck you. You can't say that. That's not the definition of male. You're a male because you want to rape. Because to him, he wants to rape, and therefore that must be what all men want. Is basically what we're getting at. But yeah, so he thinks that if he can deconstruct the gender binary, eradicate male and female, then we're going to end strife. We're going to end scarcity. We're going to end rape and all violence and all domination and all subordination. And we're going to end this entire fake, artificial social construction that is so real to us, even though it's not even true. Right? And it's like, it's such a fucking insane, like schizophrenic, self-indulgent power fantasy he's created, that all of society is this mythic dragon that he's going to slay. Him, John Stoltenberg, is going to come in there in his gay little armor with his fucking ally Dworkin, and they're just gonna ban all the porn, deconstruct the language of domination, and then we all get to have non-penetrative, gender fluid, like rubbing our dicks together sex. And it's like that's it. Like, and like that's like how he thinks he's slaying the dragon and solving all of society's problems. Like unironically. Like that's not even a fucking straw man. That's literally a steel man. And that's what it means, refusing to be a man. He wants you to refuse to penetrate women and instead consider having men touch your pee-pee. Oh, someone had a question about that I ignored. I shouldn't have. Does the author ever explain why female pee-pee touch is better than male pee-pee touch? No. He doesn't, because he doesn't acknowledge that it's about pee-pee touch. That's out of the question for him because he's gay. You have to remember he's a gay man, so he doesn't understand the pressures put on men regarding their sexual identity and the importance of female validation to male sexual identity. That doesn't occur to him at all, and I think it is something that you have to be a straight man to really understand. Because to me, it sounds fucking alien. Like I don't get it. I think it's pathetic and weird, and I want to put it out there in those terms to suggest to men that maybe it's something to overvalue, even if I don't understand it. And, maybe I'm totally off base for that, but I don't know. I listened to Elliot Rodger's manifesto, and, like, to me, he didn't seem like a crazy person. He just seemed like somebody who, like really all of that tragedy could have been extremely easily prevented at multiple instances, and I think every single person in contact with him was like a negligent piece of shit, and I actually don't prescribe much agency to him. Like I actually do think it was like because society. I think there's absolutely no reason that had he not been in a slightly healthier frame of mind and then waited it out a couple of more years, that he could have like been adjusted and been like living a happy and productive life. But no, fuck him. He's just a fucking incel murderer piece of shit, so fuck him. Anyway, if he breathes, he's a simp. That's good. I'm gonna use that. I think we need this. I think we need like an actual gender flip of radical feminists in the manosphere. Even though it's something nobody wants and nobody's asked for, I think I need to be this person. And it'll everybody in the manosphere will hate me for it and they'll want to disassociate from me, but I think someone has to do it. Someone has to fucking do it. Yeah, come at me, Susan. Fuck you. I'll just make a new channel. I'm at 500 subs. You're not gonna nuke me yet. I gotta hit 1,000 before you even notice. Anyway. Some closing thoughts. Male sexual identity is not a role. Male sexual identity is not a set of anatomical traits. Male sexual identity, the belief that one is male, the belief that there is a male sex, the belief that one belongs to it, is a politically constructed idea. This means that masculinity is an ethical construction. We construct it through our acts, through the things we choose to do and not do, though through the acts we commit that are male, things to do. Most of our choice making has to do with choosing to do acts that will make the idea of our maleness real, and that will keep far away the idea that, really, this dividing up of the species into two separate and distinct sex classes may be utterly specious after all. Most of our choice-making has to do with disassociating from all that is coded and stigmatized female. Most of our choice-making has to do with disidentifying with women. Most of our choice-making creates sexedness. So, okay, the funny thing about this, again, this is, like, see, I wasn't even straw-manning him, right? It's all a social construction. Here he's depicting it as an ethical construction defined by the actions, which is fair enough, right? We do often define things by their function, right? We define things by what they do. If I take an object that's like flat enough and has enough, and is high enough, and I put things on it, it's functioning as a table, even if it's like not, right? So there is an Aristotelian approach to this, which is like, yeah, we do define things by their function in a way, and this is one way that we can look at that which is male and that which is female. The problem is that what he's missing here is that the reason that men don't want to do things that are coded female is because men have pressure put on them from a male sex role. It is a role. It is a role that is prescribed to men, and if they don't deliver, they are going to be at the bottom of society and always have been. And these are the people, these are the oppressed and marginalized people that feminists have never been able to see, because it's always been this bitchy, upper class, like oligarchical, just condescending and self-centered fucking navel-gazing bullshit. It's always been that. It's always been an expression of privilege. And that's the irony, is that they deep down know this of themselves, and that's why they're projecting it onto everyone else. So the reason men don't have access to this female gender role is because that's a privilege. To do things which are feminine and female means that you don't have to do the things that create the luxury that's required to justify a female gendered role. So again, it's the classic case of snatching oppression from the jaws of privilege, as they say. So long as we continue to try to act in ways that keep us still men, we are doomed to paralysis, guilt, self-hatred, inertia. So long as we try to act as men, in order to continue to be men, in order to do our bit in the social construction of the entity that is the sex class men, we doom women to injustice. The injustice that adheres in the very idea that there are two sexes. Male sexual identity is constructed through the choices we make and the actions we take. We cannot continue to construct it and give ourselves fully to feminist activism. One cannot cling to one's gender as the core of one's being and be of use in the struggle. One must change the core of one's being. The core of one's being must love justice more than manhood. So, this is fascinating because you actually could apply a gender flip, right? If we look at the female sex identity as something that is socially constructed based on the luxury of society, that the degree to which you're allowed to be essentially a Disney princess is the degree to which all of these men have built the castles and the dresses and trained the fucking birds to sing with you, right? It's this entire fantastical facade of all of these stage ninjas invisible behind you, putting everything together, setting it all up for you so that you can do your Disney movie bullshit and waltz around in your little dress, etc. We'd argue, hey Belle, hey Cinderella, hey Aurora, you need to start loving justice more than your princesshood, right? How dare you? How dare you? Can you imagine the pearl clutching of these pussy-hatted people if we were to suggest to them, you need to abandon this luxury, this privileged position in society where we don't expect you to go to war. We don't expect you to do any hard labor, right? We don't expect you to be assaulted in the streets the way men are. You need to give all that up because you need to start loving justice more than femalehood. Like, could you imagine? Have you heard the truth about Frozen by Molyneux? Oh, yeah, that was quite a while back. So one thing that I like to mention to my students is I ask them, they all love Frozen, obviously, because they're, Gen Y and Gen Alpha babies, right? I like to troll them a little bit. I'll ask them, hey, did you know that Elsa's not a princess? And actually, usually they're clever and they've already heard this one. They're like, oh yeah, Elsa's a queen. Like, I know she's not a princess, she's a queen, right? But then I say, do you think Elsa was very nice to her sister? And they'll pause and think about it, and then they'll be like, shit. Like, they realize, like, she was a fucking bitch. Like, she was an absolute fucking horrible cunt to her sister, right? So I like to make them think about that, because I do like the Disney movies. I especially like the princess movies. I think that there are some good values and morals to be squeezed out of them, even if you kind of do have to really, really wring it out. And that's one thing, like in Frozen, that I want to counter a little bit of the narrative they put up at face value, because otherwise it is a very empty movie. And besides Let It Go and Do You Want to Build a Snowman, there aren't like any other good songs in it. Whereas, you watch Beauty and the Beast, like every song is a fucking bop. Like every song is so good. Like just the quality of Beauty and the Beast compared to Frozen, it's like night and day. Anyway, I got serious opinions about Disney princesses. But anyway, So the reason he can distill masculinity and femininity down to ethical constructions is, again, because it's socially constructed, and therefore, what else is there to define it but what people are doing? And the secret that he's half realizing but deliberately avoiding is that's only half the story. Anyway, let me just survey this really quick. So he has this one about other men, which I think this is the one where he compares like feminist struggle to race, which is interesting. And it has the Dworkin distinction between that which is true and that which is real, which is also very interesting. And then this one, Battery and the Will to Freedom, which is ludicrously tone deaf and retarded. And I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. So there's only two things left. I'm actually going to do it out of order. I'm going to do this one about Battery and the Will to Freedom. And I'm just going to read it because, honestly, it speaks for itself. So there's this classic thing that MRAs love to point out, which is that a lot of the times when men call any service that's related to domestic violence, you identify if you're a woman or a man. And if you identify as a man, they immediately direct you to services on how to stop being a batterer. And you have a lot of men who were abused by women, right? And the feminist treatment that they received was, here's how you can stop being violent. So I want you to just imagine that you're a battered man, right? Imagine and then you're like, man, what do I do? I need some perspective. I need some resource. I got to figure something out. Oh, hey, here's a conference on battering. Here's a conference on domestic violence. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen about battery and the will to freedom because I'm a battered man and I need to find the will to have freedom. And oh, this man, John Stoltenberg, he is a feminist academic. He is all for gender equality, right? He wants men and women to be equal, and he's all about justice and sexual justice. And he wants to end battering. And he does all these writings. He's written all these essays over the decades about masculinity. He's an expert in masculinity, and I'm a man, and he's an expert in domestic violence, and he's going to tell me what to do. He's going to give me some insight that's going to help me not get beaten by my abusive woman. Okay? And here's how it starts. Here's this address to a conference on counseling men who batter. It is a great honor to be here. The challenge you have taken on is vital, and I come before you with a mixture of gratitude and deep respect, because you are among the world changers. You are among the transformers of society, from a place where damaged lives are virtually the norm, into a place where each life is cherished and each life is fully free. You are helping make the revolution that we can't wait any longer to happen. The revolution to end men's social entitlement to power over and against women. When a woman is beaten, more breaks than her bones. When a woman lives in fear of yet another abusive outburst, another random act of violence triggered by she doesn't know what next, she lives in a terror that men rarely experience, except as abused children, or perhaps as political prisoners. Now, pause here. Should we stop and consider political prisoners are mostly male? And how fucking dare you? How fucking dare you compare? I don't care what kind of DV situation it is. That is not a fucking political prisoner. That is not a fucking prisoner of war situation. Like, I will tell that to any domestic violence victim. I'll be like, no, whatever you experienced, if you're going to try to compare it to that, absolutely not. And honestly, if you're somebody who like is a domestic violence survivor, victim, whatever language you prefer, if you're speaking to that issue and somebody publicly is comparing you to a political prisoner, you have like a duty to tell them to shut their stupid whore mouth. Like, absolutely not. This is another unpopular take I have is like, sometimes you have to tell rape victims that they're being assholes. Like, nobody wants to ever do that, which I guess I get, but I kind of don't get, because if they're being assholes, I'm going to call them out. I will like say, I'll look them in their eyes. I'll say, you who has been raped are being an asshole and you're wrong about this issue that you're talking about. And the fact that you were raped might actually make you less qualified to discuss this issue than someone who has not been raped. Right? And like that shouldn't be controversial. It honestly shouldn't be, because we all know that that's logically true. But it's like, so I don't know, like you need just the right pinch of autism, I guess, to be able to like say that publicly. But I don't know, like I say, autists rise up or whatever, like that we need to say things that are true. Anyway, when the person she thought she trusted, the person she's trying desperately to love, becomes her private torturer, her personal inquisition, she is racked with more than pain. What battery does is to beat down a woman's will to freedom. What battery does is to make her think that safety and survival lie in a smaller and smaller life. What battery does is to make her afraid of speaking her own mind, of making any assertion of her human rights. What battery does is to make her so confused, so unable to figure out a logical relationship between the punishment she receives and whatever she did to deserve it, that she loses faith in her own mental faculties. What battery does is to make her believe that she did not love well enough, so that she has failed as a woman, and to make her so ashamed that her life has come to this, that she retreats further and further into shadows and isolation. What battery does is to beat down a woman's will to freedom, because it makes her will to freedom seem her worst enemy, because she is made to believe that if she expresses it at all, she will only get in more trouble, she will only be more abused. What battery does is not an easy thing for men to grasp. Most men in our society have no conception of what it means to be deprived of the personal will to freedom. So, there's two things about this. The obvious thing that needs to be stated right up front is parity in domestic violence. The second thing is that when you have female perpetrated domestic violence, when it's not non-reciprocal violence, which is mostly female perpetrated. It's psychological abuse. So what he's describing here, like the very particularly insidious nature of domestic violence, is something that women do to men more often, and is a distinctly feminine style of abusing someone. And men who do this are actually engaging what are stereotypically female mental disorders, this cluster B shit, right? And like, he's describing this as a uniquely female problem because he's just a tone-deaf retard. So there's that whole aspect to it, right? But then let's take a step back, and I'm gonna actually suggest that not only are men house Negroes, men are battered wives. Like, all men. Like, hashtag no fucking exceptions. Because what he's described here is so much what men just take for granted. And frankly, if there is a parasitic, top-down, socially constructed, abusive narrative being applied to society, it's 100% this pro-female, anti-male bullshit. Men don't advocate for their own rights. Not only do they not sense that their rights are being taken from them and that they need to speak up as men in defense of their own male rights, but like the question doesn't even fucking occur to them, right? It's not even that they sense that they need to do it but are afraid. They're so psychologically beaten down and fucking lobotomized that they're too retarded to realize it. So this entire thing of consciousness raising, which is what he's alluding to, right? This feminist movement where they kind of came through and basically coached women into believing that they're being raped and abused. That's literally true of men. And what's so insidious and terrible about feminism is that it recognizes something that they're perpetrating and something that they're doing, and they've come out ahead of that narrative by accusing men of doing it. And that's why when I come and say, actually, no, it's you who's doing that, people will look at me and they'll say, you're just a gender flip of the feminist. And it's like, yeah, I am. Fuck you. Because it's correct. It's not, the egalitarians are fucking wrong. When people talk about matriarchy and talk about men being oppressed and men being victims and men this and that, like, you can literally take these feminist narratives and flip them, and they actually make sense in regard to men. Let's take this notion of all penis and vagina sex is rape. Yeah, it is. It's the woman raping the man. And I can defend that because the moment he's in contact with her, he's beholden to her, right? He has to provide for her. I guess I would say not rape, but slavery, right? You know, and yeah, in reality, it's so easy. It takes like just a tiny tweak, and you can justify the gender flip of the absolute worst, most man-hating feminism. And like, I would rather defend that than try to defend some bullshit libertarian egalitarian narrative that says, oh, well, men and women can all just be equal and the same if we all just like have equal rights under the law and we just scale back the government enough to not need civil rights anymore and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you know, in theory, sure. But you know what? That's not the world we live in. It's a fucking war, and you're not going to win a war unless you come out swinging. And frankly, I'd rather defend this extreme than the other one. Because I honestly do think that a lot of people within the feminist movement, they're rapists, they're batterers, they're abusers, they're just psychological monsters who prey upon the good nature of people and do it ad nauseum, and they know this about themselves. And their way of coping with how fucking evil they are is to just accuse everyone else of doing it, because the world doesn't work exactly the way they want it to, and therefore it must be everybody else. It must be all other men who are the rapists. It must be all other women who are manipulators and liars and cheaters. It must be all other women who need their consciousness raised to realize how much of a victim they are, right? Anyway, sorry, I feel better just for having ranted a bit. I don't know, is there anything else in this? It's just a lot of poetic garbage. That's charitable, it's not even that poetic. You often hear a lot about freedom. Freedom of this, freedom of that. Socially, the freedom that's talked about is white men's freedom. That's literally not talked about. Oh, I get it. It's implicit. Okay, guys. So keep that in mind. He thinks that when we talk about freedom, that's only white men's freedom. It's because reasons, right? It's not like there's decades of laws that explicitly give special advantages to people who are non-white and people who are non-male. It's not like that ever happened. It's not like that's been the case forever. It's not like it's been illegal for things to preference whites or males, even in effect, like even tangentially, right? Let alone explicitly. What you don't hear a lot about is the extent to which men's private sexual violence against women has created an underclass of the unfree, an underclass of women who are so unfree that freedom of speech to them is inconceivable. To speak out freely is to risk a particular man's wrath, a particular man's violence, a particular man's silencing. This particular man who she would have to be dependent upon for resources, right? This particular man who is her slave, right? Because if that weren't the arrangement, then there'd be no reason that she can't just leave, right? That's always the counter argument. Unless she's being physically captured, physically constrained, which, that happens, sure. But, if we're going to retreat to that narrative, we're talking about something that's extremely rare. If we're talking about this problem in terms of 99% of it, the immediate argument is she can't leave because she's dependent on his resources, right? Which is to say, he's her slave. So again, it's like, if you only look at half of half of the discussion, it's just, it falls apart immediately as soon as you see the whole picture. Anyway, an underclass of women for whom the right of privacy is non-existent, for whom body access on demand has made both sleep and sex a nightmare. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness do not mean anything if you're being battered. Most men in this country have a gut knowledge of the difference between freedom and unfreedom. Most men live lives characterized by quite a lot of liberty, actually. But even if they're not relatively free, at least they know it, and they know that freedom is what they need. Most men grew up with a confident sense of their entitlement to freedom, a confidence that was nurtured throughout the exuberance and expansiveness of their youth, a confidence that was congratulated by the culture wherever they turned. Again, this is completely false. Men don't say it. They have a confidence about it, right? But they don't actually have the freedom. And I don't know, what would you prefer? To actually have freedom or to actually have a confidence about your freedom? Right? Let's see. This, you're just a gender flip of the feminists is just people trying to appease the most insane of the two parties by throwing the MRAs under the bus. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's the thing, too, is that the point is that when someone says you're just a gender flip of feminists, I'm going to suggest that the correct response to that is, so fucking what? Is that wrong? Show me it's wrong, right? Like, show me what trying to be moderate and in the middle and trying to compromise and be all nuanced about this shit has gotten you. Fucking nothing. And if you're going to throw one of us under the bus, why me? Why the MRAs? What the fuck have we done? Like, why can't we be radical? Radical feminism has been enshrined in higher education for decades. Radical feminism is celebrated in the streets right now, being enacted in the streets right now, right? It's a popular political movement, a linchpin of a fucking Marxist narrative, right? Just like household terms. It's household everyday philosophy, this radical feminist garbage. And you're going to sit there and say, oh, these radical MRAs, these are the people who we need to put in check. We better make sure we quash this before it gets as bad as the feminists, as if that's even fucking possible, right? And yeah, what they're doing is they're just trying to satiate the more insane one by throwing down the ones who are easier to beat up upon because they don't have any support and because it's just a socially unpopular thing to say. Yeah, and they're just engaging in the kind of like social constructivist ethics that, is condemned by feminists, and which they're saying is also bullshit. I don't know. It's just, again, I don't get people. Like, most of them, they're fucking aliens to me. But for some along the way, an awful message got learned. Your survival as a man depends on conquering the will to freedom of a woman.
again, why would that? No, that's not it. If you conquer and destroy a woman, society destroys you, right? If you want to be a man and have a happy existence and to procreate and to move on and to do the whole traditional male role, it's fundamentally based on making a woman happy. It's happy wife, happy life. You know, like this is the kind of approach to traditional masculinity and a traditional male gender role that only a degenerate rapist gay man could possibly have. Making it not existent in your private world, the world you were taught you could own, the world you were taught belonged to you, your home, your castle, where her will to freedom equals your unfreedom, where your freedom equals the extinction of hers. What are you anyway, a pussy-whipped wimp? Show her who's boss, show her whose castle it is. Again, who says this? Women say this. Like this is what women want. Women want men to man up and to take the responsibility necessary to make that gender dynamic work. Anyway, let us note this morning that millions of women's voices have been silenced, censored by fear or force within a private sanctuary that our nation defends against foreign aggressors, in the bitterly ironic name of domestic security, with billions of dollars worth of military might, all that firepower to keep some of us safe at home. Right, so this is the argument. This goes back to the part about war, right, where all these feminists are saying, hey, you guys, I know you guys are fighting a war right now, but what about women who have their feelings hurt at home? Like, how come domestic security isn't stopping all of domestic violence, huh? How come it's not fighting them, huh? How come your war in Vietnam isn't all about me and my vagina? How dare you shame me as being a selfish, navel-gazing cunt just for saying that? Like, just because I'm being one, you're gonna call me that? How dare you, right? It's so fucking stupid. It's like the most retarded comparison you could ever make. Sorry, no, you are not a prisoner of war. Like, 0%. You got a million fucking shelters to go to. You can go anywhere. You're a strong, independent, powerful woman. You can get a job anywhere. And when you speak out about it, you can like make a fucking novel of it. You can make speeches about it. You know, you can do anything. Like there's no shame in it. There's no stigmatization. There's rarely any physical barrier to it. The reason that you're not homeless as a woman is because anyone will just take you in. They'll trust you. They're not going to assume that you're like a fucking murderer or whatever. You're not going to have to sleep under a bridge. Like I'm sorry, it's life on easy mode. And I don't prefer to make these conversations about privilege and all that shit and to put things in those terms. But if you're going to fucking force my hand by suggesting that there's any comparison to fucking war and domestic violence, like, no, that's absolutely just hard no. You have undertaken, or are about to, the task of working with individual men who have in one way or another attempted to crush the will to freedom of individual women. This makes you, in a sense, freedom fighters. You are using the powers of persuasion and education and counsel and good example to bring a particular man to understand his particular responsibility for what he has done. Because you share a rock-hard belief that this responsibility not only must be acknowledged, but can be acknowledged. I don't need to tell you, the job is tough. So this is just a way of him patting himself on the back, right? So John Stoltenberg is just like a massive pussy / rapist, or at least wannabe rapist. And he wants to believe that his struggle in writing his gay little essays is somehow comparable to like going off to war. And it's not, John. Go fuck yourself, you self-indulgent piece of shit. Ugh. But what you must always remember is this. The job is revolutionary. The work you are doing or about to do is part of a courageous, ongoing struggle to eradicate from humanity all vestiges of male supremacy. That's the big picture. And I want to say something this morning about the absolutely critical role that your work plays in this struggle. To do that, comma, you motherfucker, comma, to do that, comma. Why is there no comma here? God. To do that, I want to focus on how your work can profoundly change the relationship between men's sense of who they are and the responsibility they take for what they do. Normal masculinity, as I'm sure you're aware, is often tenaciously resistant to acknowledging responsibility of that sort. She made me do it. I couldn't help myself. She made me so angry. The bitch. She had it coming. Stop here. Okay. Normal femininity, as I'm sure you're aware, is often tenaciously resistant to acknowledging responsibility of that sort. He made me do it. I couldn't help myself. He made me so angry. The bastard. He had it coming. Which one of those do you think has more currency socially? Legally, literally legally, in a court of law, proven by the fucking pussy pass, right? Like, stop grammar shaming. I know, right? This whole fucking thing should just be in Ebonics, really. This whole thing is a white supremacist love letter because he didn't write it in Ebonics. Although he did dip into it at a point, which was... It felt like blackface, honestly. But anyway. I also want to note here, his choice of quotes here, the first one, she made me do it, that's actually acknowledging the wrongness of the thing and then blaming someone else. But the other ones, I don't know, it's so stupid. Like, as if there's any comparison to how we treat male perpetrated violence versus female perpetrated violence, right? Masculinity actually seems addicted to acknowledging responsibility where it's not even responsible. I would say if there's anything, if there's any such thing as toxic masculinity, it's taking responsibility that you actually shouldn't, and where you should actually take a step back and be like, actually, no, I'm not responsible for this. Let the world fucking burn. Build your own fucking castle. You see it in rape, too. She provoked me. She wanted it. I didn't do anything wrong. Now, pause here. If someone accuses you of rape falsely, the defense naturally is going to be either the sex never even occurred, it's a total 100% fabrication, or more likely, the sex that occurred was consensual, right? Which is to say, she wanted it. That's literally the defense. And he's suggesting that that must be a lie, right? I mean, I guess if we're going to take him at his word and say this is what we're talking about with rape, but like, I don't know. I feel like this fucker's never seen a rape accusation he didn't reject. Oh, I guess besides Dworkin's, but I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't deny that the rape occurred, not who wouldn't rape her, obviously. But you also see men's denial and evasion of their responsibility for interpersonal conduct in a whole host of everyday life contexts that apparently, only apparently, have nothing to do with battery and sexual violence. He bullies her and blames her, or he lies to her and discounts her, or he breaks a promise to her and berates her. Normal masculinity, it sometimes seems, is characterologically unable to coexist with a functioning self-awareness of ethical accountability. This is the big picture, too, and it's not pretty. Manhood is both a developmental process and a normative identity structure. It's not only how you grow up, it's what you're supposed to grow up to be. It's the pathway and the intended destination. It's the process and the goal. Too often, only the developmental process gets critiqued. In fact, it gets looked at as the sole and sufficient explanation of whatever has gone wrong. When a man rapes, when a man batters, when a man sexually violates or humiliates someone for his pleasure. This search for an explanation of men's abusiveness and violence sometimes borders on being a search for an apology. How could he be any different, poor thing? Look how he grew up. Thus does men's evasion of ethical accountability get therapeutic validity and academic respectability. Now again, let's do this. Can we stop and consider that there's a disproportionate influence of white females on therapy and psychology, right? And that a lot of behaviors that are manipulative, where you paint yourself as the victim, where you do like kind of histrionic bullshit, a lot of that is normalized, right? And then you have things that are pathologized, right? And it's disproportionately affecting boys, right? It's boys who are being given the ADHD drugs because we have an entire system of caregiving and nurturing that's outsourced to the state via public education, and even in private schools as well. That's just kind of public light, to be honest. We outsource it in that way and then have a system that's based entirely on helping girls succeed. And then when males don't fit that mold, we drug them, right? How is that in any way therapeutic validity and academic respectability being used to give men an excuse to evade ethical accountability when men are more often held ethically responsible for their actions, and when it's therapy and psychology that's more often telling boys that they're the ones who are broken and they're the ones who are wrong and need to be fixed? Now, I get it. Like, this is before a lot of this shit got mainstream. It's aged incredibly poorly. As it would, because he's completely fucking wrong. So naturally, over time, as things get worse, as voices like Stoltenberg's are exalted, and we saw people take seriously the kinds of ludicrous demands that he's painted here, of course we saw things get worse, right? He's saying, oh, how dare we use masculinity as some sort of a roadmap? How dare we suggest that, we should be thinking about what it is to be a man and to use this as a way to promote healthy and well-adjusted behaviors in society? No, fuck that. We need to deconstruct the whole thing. And now we're looking at things in 2020 saying, what is masculinity? Where is it? We have a lack of it. Why is society crumbling? I wonder why. I fucking wonder why. But the other thing too, okay, he did this also, right? When he was explaining the origins of masculinity, he argued in so many words that it's all based on domestic violence, right? How is he not guilty of the exact same fucking thing that he's accusing others of? I guess he's arguing that men can change. Okay, fine. But he still does the same thing. He still delves into the same kind of like Freudian fucking logic of like what happens in your childhood imprints on you and gets replicated and does make sense. And he's knowledgeable enough to know that there's truth to that. He's knowledgeable enough to know that like your formative years are formative, right? This is just bizarre to me. Like, this is just, he just knows he can get away with saying anything and not being challenged on anything. Like, what is he suggesting? Is he suggesting that child abuse doesn't matter? Is he suggesting that nothing that occurs in your childhood is going to have a determinative influence on who you become later, right? Because clearly he understands that. He understands that well enough to base a huge fucking manner of his little narrative on that, right? Because he needs that to do a lot of heavy lifting for his social constructivist narrative to make sense, right? But then he's gonna have his cake and eat it too. He's going to then say, well, I think that people put too much emphasis on childhood and it's a way for men to avoid accountability for being rapists. Maybe, John Stoltenberg, you're writing these essays to avoid accountability for the fact that you are either a rapist or a wannabe rapist. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there. Because honestly, if he's going to make these kinds of like baseless, retarded accusations, I'm going to make my own. Because sometimes you got to counter gay bitchiness with more gay bitchiness. How much more of this? I think this one is almost at the end. It's so long. Okay, there's like 2 pages left. In fact, if you think about it, unconsciousness of ethical accountability is a core component of the masculinity that a lot of the men grew up believing they should strive for, especially in relation to anyone a man perceives as less worthy than himself, less a full person than himself. A real man doesn't have to pay attention to the consequences of his acts. His acts against his inferiors don't matter because his inferiors don't matter, and vice versa. The people he thinks are inferior don't matter, so whatever he does to them doesn't matter either. I wonder, these inferiors, could that possibly include men? And might that be exclusively other men? He's so close, so close. When we talk about male supremacy, and male supremacy too, one of the things when we talk about male supremacy and white supremacy too, one of the things we're really talking about is the ethical abandon with which someone in the socially superior class feels he's entitled to treat someone outside it. The absence of ethical accountability he feels, his lack of regard for how what he does affects someone else, is a key fixture of the sexual and racial identity he gets to feel, and is also the major way that the sex and race class system gets maintained interpersonally. Among a lot of experts and activists in the anti-battery movement, the evidence has generally been accepted that one of the reasons men batter is because of something called the male sex role stereotype. Now, frankly, I don't think those words say enough. They don't go far enough. Those words are not adequate for getting at the ethical core of normative manhood, the place inside a man's head where he knows he's a real man because he gets to believe that someone else is less real, in particular, someone who isn't male. Those words, the male sexual stereotype, don't really delineate the way a man's sense of a normal gender identity comes from an ethical transaction, what happens when he actively discounts or damages the selfhood of someone else, in particular someone female. It's an identity he doesn't have to be a Rambo to achieve. He just has to put down a woman, to negate her will to freedom. And if you call him on it, if you say something like, "Look, fella, what you're doing is a real male number." This is like the whitest thing I've ever heard. "Hey there, fella. Look there, buddy. What you're doing is a real male number." What do you get? Do you get the recognition that you might have a good point there? Do you get the ethical self-reflection of someone who keeps track of what he does and how it might have consequences for someone else? Do you get the moral sensibility of someone who is conscientious about knowing the difference between the right stuff he's done and the wrong stuff he's done? So he'll know as much as he humanly can about how to make his choices better in the future? Do you get a sense of selfhood that takes full responsibility for its actions, knowing full well that that's really the only way anyone on this earth ever has? Is there a fucking? Oh, there's a thing on my screen. I thought it was a hyphen. Sorry. Do you get a sense of selfhood that takes full responsibility for its actions, knowing full well that that's really the only way anyone on this earth has of honoring their connection to other human life? No, you don't. That's what he's getting at. Now, conversely, if you tell a woman she's being emotional, you will get that, right? That's the implication here. In your counseling work, as you challenge men who have abused women to confront, understand, and own their responsibility for what they have done, you are cracking through, bit by bit, the wall that has been erected between how a man acts toward others and his sense of who he is. Breaking down that wall is crucial. If it stays intact socially, so does the whole superstructure of male supremacy. If it stays intact personally, he'll never know his own connection to the very humanity he so far fails to recognize in the people he thinks don't matter. This work is important because it challenges the normative identity itself, the destination, the goal. The belief that to be a real man means to get to believe that someone else is not as real. Through the work you do in counseling, and by the example of your own lives, you have an opportunity to create a revolutionary new sense of selfhood, one this world urgently needs, a sense of self that has the courage to will someone else's freedom. Okay, so here's what's so freaking toxic about this. Men who beat women have a problem, right? They have a problem psychologically, and it's something that needs to be dealt with in individual terms. It's like a varied sort of a problem that needs an individuated understanding and an individuated solution for it to make sense in that particular thing. What this dumb motherfucker is doing is he's addressing these male counselors who are going to be dealing with male batterers, right? And he tells them the way to combat this issue is to make it about the masculine identity and about male supremacy, and to fight that entire overall structure. He's doing this because it's a cope for him. He knows John Stoltenberg, is a fucked up individual with a fucked up attitude and a fucked up psychology. And his way of coping with that is to say, oh, that must be normal for all men. And therefore, he's going to tell these counselors that the way that they're going to address these male batterers is by having them deconstruct their fucking masculinity, to give them a one-size-fits-all fucking solution to go into all of these things, in order for people like John Stoltenberg and the male feminists to feel more secure in their own fucked up psychologies. So in other words, they're using domestic violence as a vehicle to feel psychologically at home in the here and now, and have no problem applying this completely insane and backwards, one-size-all sort of approach to everything because it serves his political agenda and his own psychology. Like, and it's either it's ignorant or it's just like evil. And I don't know if there's a halfway between that. How do you say this shit and not take a step back and think, wait a minute, like maybe I went off the rails here. Like maybe I should consider what aspects of this are not gendered. Maybe I should actually think of what a person might be thinking, like actually on an individual level, instead of just mass prescribing, oh, it's because you want to make someone else feel not real because it makes you feel like a man, because being a man means you beat women and rape them. Like, anyway, what else is there to say? It's just, and like, it bothers me that low IQ or mid-witted men will read something like this and they'll think, oh wow, he used a lot of big words and he seemed to apply them correctly and he has a lot of footnotes and he's a big academic man and wow, that sounded real smart and I was so dazzled by this language here that he must be correct, right? And like they'll think this about themselves, or they're a fucked up person who thinks, oh, this must be normal for all other men, so I get to feel normal this way. And the problem is that not enough men are deconstructing all of masculinity in order to spread the radical notion that you shouldn't beat women. Like, yeah, simps are cancer, male feminists are cancer, okay? Like, when the men's rights movement succeeds, has any success whatsoever, I fucking hope they add a clause that excludes the male feminists, because they don't deserve it. They should get genocided in Minecraft or otherwise. Anyway, let's look at this last essay. How long is this one? This one's short-ish. I don't want to read this one in its entirety. It's too long to read in its entirety. But anyway, I'm going to jump through a little bit. Let's see. Some of us are the other men that some of us are very wary of. Some of us are the other men that some of us don't trust. So he talks about, you know, the other men are feminist men, basically. Right? And he's talking about how feminist men are sort of alienated and removed from the patriarchal structure that other men achieve. But he suggests that there's so many pressures for men to socialize with others that they're going to immediately abandon their feminist principles for a little bit of advantage, right? And that there's a struggle between the idealism and the pragmatism there. So he's kind of exposing this hypocrisy in male feminism. He talks about how he has been obsessed with other men for a long, long time. I have lived years of my life agonizing about how different I felt from other men. I have wanted more than anything to be more like other men than I could ever hope to be. Now, he's kind of referring to being gay, but I think he's actually referring to wanting to be a rapist. Honestly, this is refusing to be a rapist. That's what he means. And I think that by applying his fucked up psychology to all other men, he's feeling better about his wanting to rape other men. And I think that in depicting masculinity this way, he is actually making men into something that's not real, which is what he's accusing men of doing to women. He's doing it to men, right? Because he believes that the entire identity of male is a performative, fake, untrue thing that's only made real through a perpetration, and that perpetration tends to be rape and domestic violence. This is a construction of a threat narrative, and I think I'm the first one to notice this. This is like fucking Spacepan's law here, is the construction of a threat narrative. The purpose of it is to justify a violation of the non-aggression principle. right, is to package your target as transgressing, right, as committing an aggression and violating the NAP in order to justify your own retaliation, which is actually not a retaliation, but is in fact an NAP aggression, right? I could say that more eloquently, but that's basically the narrative. That's the purpose of threat narratives. Like when I think when Allison was talking about threat narratives in her series, she was so focused on like the social narrative and these political movements. But when you bring it down to the individual level, everyone's a libertarian. Everyone believes in the non-aggression principle. There may be some dispute as to its exact delineation, but there's no avoiding that. There's absolutely no legal system that has ever avoided that and ever will avoid that. So it's a non-unique problem. But because we all intuitively get this, and we get this intuitively on a level that we don't get with any other thing, whether it's religion, politics, law, even basic things like just reality existing itself, we seem to get the non-aggression principle better, and that's why you see these constant constructions of threat narratives. And I believe that his entire treatment of masculinity is to recontextualize male bodies as perpetrators, as constant rapists in their being, because this is psychologically convenient to John Stoltenberg. This allows him to justify his wanting to rape men. Because, I mean, who cares? If you rape a rapist, you know, fuck it, right? I don't know, did I crack the code? I think I cracked the code. I think I'm going to give myself a sip of beer to reward myself. I'm proud of this. I don't care what anyone says. You can call this part 4 of me making a false rape accusation stream. Everyone else is doing it. I just want to be popular. I just want to be popular like Shoe on Head and make baseless accusations of people for no reason and then be popular for looking like Boxy. Why is that so much to ask? Okay. Anyway. What the issue is. One of the reasons I started to care about radical feminism as much as I did was because it seemed to resolve for me a certain dilemma about myself in relation to other men. I had always felt irredeemably different. Even when no one else noticed, I knew. I knew I wasn't really one of them. Yeah, maybe because other men aren't rapists, okay? Because men are not rapists, you are the weird one. When I first began to come in contact with the ideas of radical feminism, those ideas seemed to put to rest that certain trouble. Yeah, because it's a fucking psychological cope. You see how fucking right I am? I'm so 1000% right that I can't even get over it. I can't even get over enough to read any of this. Radical feminism helped me imagine a gender-just future, a notion of a possibility that men need not be brutish and loutish. I don't know that word, loutish. What is loutish? Loutish. Loutish means uncouth and aggressive, thuggish. And this is interesting. They specify of a man or boy. We need a ban loutish campaign, right? Ban loutish. There's literally a gendered insult directed towards men and boys that's synonymous with uncouth, rude, impolite, unmannerly, ill-mannered, ill-bred, coarse, thuggish, boorish, oafish, rowdy, bullying, uncivilized, wild, rough, vulgar, philistine, common, crass, yobbish, slobbish. Smash the matriarchy. Fucking ban loutish. I'm so triggered by his sexist, insensitive language here. Anyway, that women need not be cutesy and coy. It was a vision that energized me. It helped me view the whole male supremacist structure of gender as a social construction, not as a final judgment on our natures, not as a final judgment on mine. Again, like, this is just him realizing something about himself, and he's telling us right now that radical feminism gave him the sophistry necessary to cope with underlying individual psychological problems that he has and doesn't want to address or deal with. Radical feminism helped me honor in myself the differences that I felt between myself and other men. No, it didn't. No, it fucking didn't. No, it didn't. by honor, it made you say that your wanting to be a rapist is something that all men experience and that it's all society's fault and not anything that has anything to do with you or your upbringing or your biology or your psychology. That's what it did. Radical feminism helped me know my connections to the lives of women with whom I had not imagined I would ever find a model for who I could be. And it's also true, and not easy to admit, that radical feminism helped provide me with a forum in which to express my anger at other men, an anger that in men can run very deep, as many of us know. I think that for many men who have become anti-sexist over the past several years, their anti-sexism has had meaning to them for similar reasons. In various ways, feminism has blown like a gust of fresh air through a lifetime spent agonizing and anguishing about the place of other men in our lives. For a few of us, feminism has helped us breathe a bit easier. Literally, it's a cope. It's a sophist fucking cope, and he's telling us that it's an outlet for his rage, and because he has that outlet, it's prevented him from raping people. Hashtag literally. Hashtag literally 1000% verbatim. But it would be a mistake to suggest that a man's anti-sexism puts to rest his ambivalence toward other men. I think that an anti-sexist consciousness actually makes the conflict more acute. Such a man perceives even more clearly the behaviors and attitudes in other men that he rejects, and he understands more about what those behaviors and attitudes mean, and in a sense they are the behaviors and attitudes in himself that he wants to be rid of, and somehow other men can remind him of the parts of himself that have not changed very much at all, and whereas he briefly felt good about being different from other men, a part of him no longer feels quite different enough. Do you see how, my, raving, ludicrous accusation that he's a wannabe rapist, the further we get into this, it's screaming how much sense it makes, right? Because by engaging in this radical feminist sophistry, suggesting that there's something inherently rapey about male sexual identity, he's realizing, oh, now I have a way of expressing what it is I don't like about men, including myself, and that maybe we're not all so different, right? Do you see how it's literally exactly what the fuck I'm saying? Exactly. Am I overstating my case? Am I playing my hand too much? I don't know. I really don't. I think I hit the nail on the head. Anyway, so his anger at other men intensifies as a means of keeping clear to himself that he's an exception. Meanwhile, he misses the company of other men, their ease, their companionship, the good feelings he remembers having had in their presence. For many men, the issue of other men is a classic conflict of approach and avoidance. For a man whose life increasingly has to do with anti-sexism, the conflict cuts to the bone. He struggles with what it means to be a man, and whether he feels ashamed or proud. For anti-sexist men who are gay, this conflict has an explicitly sexual aspect. Just the red flags. It's screaming. It's screaming. Stay away. Stay away. The more sensitive a man becomes to the sexism in other men's attitudes and behaviors, the more it matters to him that his sexual partners be men who share his worldview, and the less able he is to accept sexist small talk and jokes as a token of the kind of comradeship that he seeks. For a man to whom the sexual political character of his sexual partners matters, he is increasingly faced with a choice between abandoning his principles and abandoning his sex life. A man of good character is hard to find, as anyone who has looked can tell you. So, on the surface, right, he's saying, well, hey, I'm a gay man and I need to find an anti-sexist gay man, which, that's not hard. I'm sorry. That's, you think it's hard to find your feminist gay person? Try finding one who's anti-feminist, right? So much rarer, right? Fucking world's smallest violin for you. But of course, he's not talking about being gay, right? If you assume he's talking about being a rapist, this makes so much more sense, right? He needs someone who shares that worldview. Why? Because then the person he's raping is a rapist, and therefore it's not a non-aggression principle violation. Which is the entire point of this book, the entire point of his psychology. But whether or not a man longs for a companionship with other men that wants to be sexual, he is confronted with a seemingly insoluble dilemma. He He has his ideas, his beliefs, his vision, his commitments about a just future in which gender would not divide us, and he has a longing for the company and validation of other men, men who, more often than not, do not share his anti-sexism. So yeah, they don't meet his impossible and retarded standard because his standard has nothing to do with fucking reality. I'm gonna go ahead and skip this part. Okay. This was the only interesting part about this entire essay besides, like, the implicit admission that he's a rapist. Okay, so how do we know that change is really possible? One important answer to that question is contained in a passage from the book Our Blood by Andrea Dworkin, where she makes this crucial distinction between reality and truth. Reality is social. Reality is whatever people at a given time believe it to be. Reality is always a function of politics in general and sexual politics in particular. That is, it serves the powerful by fortifying and justifying their right to domination over the powerless. Reality is whatever premises social and cultural institutions are built on. Reality is enforced by those whom it serves so that it appears to be self-evident. Reality is self-perpetuating, in that the cultural and social institutions built on its premises also embody and enforce those premises. The given reality is, of course, that there are two sexes, male and female, that these two sexes are opposite from each other, polar, that the male is inherently positive and the female inherently negative, and that the positive and negative poles of human existence unite naturally into a harmonious whole. Truth, on the other hand, is not nearly so accessible as reality. Truth is absolute in that it does exist, and it is the human project to find it so that reality can be based on it. I have made this distinction between truth and reality in order to enable me to say something very simple, that while the system of gender polarity is real, it is not true. It is not true that there are two sexes which are discrete and opposite, which are polar, which unite naturally and self-evidently into a harmonious whole. The system, based on this polar model of existence, is absolutely real, but the model itself is not true. We are living imprisoned inside a pernicious delusion, a delusion on which all reality, as we know it, is predicated. So, I thought that was actually very interesting, right? I think it's because I'm all about people defining their own words to say something that's like explicit, right? Like, I wouldn't use these definitions in everyday language, because I think it's fucking cumbersome as hell. And I'm actually gonna just paste this. I'm gonna paste some of this into the chat because I think it's very interesting. But this really does help make sense of the social constructivist, like Marxist, kind of postmodern bullshit narrative. It's way too many characters for the chat. I'm not going to bother to break it up. It's too much. But the irony behind it is that the depiction of reality that she's suggesting, the framework is fine. I'll totally accept her framework, right? That reality is social, reality is whatever people believe it to be, and that it's a function of politics and sexual politics. Sure, that's very important to this. Apparently, John Stoltenberg doesn't seem to understand how much of male feminism is based on getting the pee-pee touched, right? Maybe if he read more Dworkin, he would have noticed that. But yeah, is that if you're in power, right, you can fortify and justify this conception of reality, right, through these social systems and through cultural institutions, right? And that it's something that's perceived and it becomes real in that sense. It's a reality you have to live with. And the reason I actually like this is because when you tell someone you're going to get real, right, there's an inherently social aspect to it, right, to be real. And it's that you're dishing out like a harsh truth, right? You're spilling the tea, right? And that's what it means to be real, right? I mean, I get that that's obviously the implication is that it's also true, but that's the idea. Is anybody who's promoting a version of reality, they're obviously doing it because the implication is that it is in fact true, but realities that are based on untruths still have realness in their consequences, right? And this is a really, really useful way to parse out these apparent self-contradictions. And I really, really wish that people, like these kind of like conservative Inc., cultural libertarians, people on the right, coffee shop anti-feminists, I really wish that they would be a little bit more serious when they try to deconstruct radical feminist bullshit. Maybe I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite because I'm not taking this super seriously. But like, for example, when people like go after like trans people and say like, oh, this like how come you have gender fluid when there's only PP and vajayjay? There's two. That's one too. I counted two. And like it's so like basic bitch and retarded when like the radical feminists give us these distinctions and they give us this language necessary to understand what they're actually saying. And nothing is gained by straw manning their argument and defeating the straw man. No, steel man and then destroy it, because the steel man is like way funnier and way more stupid. But for her, it all falls apart when she unironically believes that the given reality is based on this dualistic approach where all that is good is associated with the male and all that is evil is associated with the female. That's retarded. That's 1000% not the case. It's almost the opposite, but even within dualism, there's typically a striving for balance. And when you have a strive for balance, the implication is that both sides of it have good and evil, right? Because if one of those sides was explicitly evil and explicitly dark and had everything packaged in it that's wrong, why the fuck would you advocate for a balance? There'd be absolutely no reason to advocate for a balance in that scenario. This idea that, oh, femininity is always associated with negative things. That's not true. I just read you 16 fucking synonyms for a word that's gendered male to describe apparently bad male behavior, right? And it's not hard to do this. It's anywhere you look, there's all kinds of language that's gendered male that's intended to shame negative aspects of a male sexual identity. And like it's just preposterous that people like Dworkin and Stoltenberg pretend that they're like experts on gender and in language and in psychology and in politics and culture and whatever, and like they just pretend to be totally ignorant to this conception that in reality, right, this untrue, strictly socially enforced reality, that there's absolutely nothing negative associated with men, as they wax poetic and write countless fucking essay after essay about how all men are rapists. Right? Like they are this thing, and they literally can't even look in the mirror and see that they are exalted and celebrated in society, kept in polite company, allowed to give their stupid little conventions and speeches and lectures and to be professors and to write their fucking books and to be celebrated in their circles and to not be unpersoned, as they literally talk about males as if they're all rapists like they are. Anyway. So yeah, but anyway, I will say I like the distinction, but and then of course this whole thing where he says, you know, truth is there's no such thing as gender polarity, but there is. It's just it's not a strict binary in the sense that it's an on-off switch, right? So yeah, so patriarchy, as described by feminists, is real but not true. Exactly, right? And here's the irony, is that her conception of the structure of reality is real because people believe that reality is real, right? But that reality is untrue, but for different reasons. It's very easy to get tangled up in this shit, right? Like, the real reality is that people will listen to what Dworkin described as reality and think that that's the reality. So it's a meta-reality, which I don't like to use that because I think that we shouldn't be jacked up arbitrary levels of abstraction for no fucking reason. But patriarchy is not the reality we live in. To some extent, patriarchy is truth in the sense that males tend to be superior in a lot of regards, right? That they're just, they produce among human beings the people who are the best at producing things, including inventions, including being innovative, and including like providing the necessary infrastructure for society to fucking function, right? In that sense, patriarchy has truth to it. It's just an aspect of, or it's a consequence of sexual dimorphism, right? That just we can't avoid it. But reality is the belief that patriarchy theory is real. So the belief that patriarchy is the reality, that belief is the actual reality. And that is the underlying falsehood. You know what I mean? So we have truth, reality, and meta-reality. Reality is patriarchy conjecture. Meta-reality is the belief that patriarchy conjecture is real and is true. So we can take Dworkin's own framework here and apply it to feminism itself and see that that's what's actually going on here. Because again, it's always projection. What they're doing is creating a version of reality that's not based in truth, and on some psychological level, they know that that's what they're doing because they know it's all fucking garbage, horse shit. And the easiest cope is to accuse everyone else of doing that which they do. And if that is in fact the case, you'll end up with exactly what I've described. You're going to have truth, which is, A is A, law of identity, right? Gravity, whatever, all that gay shit. And then you have reality, which is what they think is reality, which is not reality, which is patriarchy conjecture. It's at best half-truths, but even that's charitable. And in doing so, in presenting that reality as the socially accepted reality, what people do is they think that they're being above it and think they're being meta by accepting the meta-reality. But the meta-reality is actually what they're describing as reality. Do you follow me? Does that make sense? I think I need like a chart, but that was my big revelation here, because that's literally exactly what's going to happen if in fact this theory of feminist projection is in fact true. Like that would be the only way for it to be expressed. And then of course what happens is, since they came out ahead of the accusations that are true of them, now trying to deconstruct their convoluted bullshit needs an additional level of abstraction, and like nobody can fucking follow it. So it's brilliant. It's fucking brilliant. I hate these people. They're the worst. This is hashtag hate speech. This is hashtag false rape accusations. This is hashtag domestic violence victims are not fucking prisoners of war. This is hashtag John Stoltenberg is literally a rapist. What else? Was there anything else interesting in here? He talks again about deconstructing the male sex class identity. And he compares it to race in this way that's kind of interesting, right? Because he points out that, like, it's pretty easy for people to talk about race issues. It's pretty easy for people to talk about their white privilege, but it's a lot harder for people to talk about male privilege, because he suggests that your sexual identity is, like, more important to your sense of self than your race. And I think that's true. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. So I think that actually did make a lot of sense. But the idea that you identify that in people their sexual identity is important to them, and then your response to that is to say, let's throw it away and deconstruct it, and let's code everything horrible and negative and evil about society as male, right? In order to have, like, what? This, like, gender fluid bullshit thing? It's just like the review that I read on the beginning of the first part one. The guy says, you know what, even if I accept all of this, what is he giving me to replace it with? And he gives us a little bit of that. He gives us a little bit of guidance on, like, here's how sex could be, right? But he doesn't seem to provide anything in the way of, like, a coherent male identity. And it is a little bit similar to criticisms of libertarianism from a religious perspective, right? That when you have a religion, the religion's giving you a whole body of things and a whole culture and a whole tradition, and like it can be accepted as a whole and like does all these things. Whereas with libertarianism, we're just saying, hey, just don't murder people, don't steal, don't rape. And then people say, okay, well, what do I do? What's the point? And it's like, I don't fucking know. I don't fucking care. Do whatever the fuck you want. Like, I don't know, like, do you want to live? Like, go figure out what the fuck you want to do. Like, why is that my responsibility? And, like, so many people, they can't handle that. Like, if that's what you say to them, they're like, no, you don't understand. Like, I need to have, like, a prescribed purpose, even if I know it's false, right? And, like, I think people are looking for that in their sexual identity. They need masculinity to mean I do these things to be fulfilled. And they need femininity to mean I do these things and I'm fulfilled. And that is something that I guess, I don't know, I guess I just don't understand it. And I know that there's a lot of people in the manosphere, they want to have conversations about, well, what is masculinity? What does it mean? And frankly, I'm largely uninterested in that. Like, I am very individualistic in that sense. I just don't get the fucking point. I don't understand why people need an identity. Like for example, people, like, they say, oh, what if you woke up as the opposite sex in the morning? Like, to me, I wouldn't care that much. It'd be interesting. I'd be so, like, enraptured by the novelty of it that I'd have, like, a blast, right? Like or the Ranma 1/2 situation. People say, oh, my identity, what am I gonna do? Am I a man? Am I a woman? Hot water, cold water. It's like to me, I just find that to be so like such a stupid thing to care about. But I think that maybe I exist in a timeline that, like, people like me otherwise wouldn't have been able to exist because they didn't have the luxury of not needing that. Anyway, yeah, I don't think there's anything else in this article that I even care to respond to. A lot of it's just going to be redundant because, again, these essays, largely he's hitting on the same notes because a lot of these were meant to kind of stand alone anyway. So I think reading through all of it is just a bit redundant. Maybe I'll just read the last paragraph of it here to see if there's any other bit. The pride to which we aspire is not in being men, but in being men who are living their lives in a way that will make a difference. We must be transformers of selfhood, our own and others. If we are not, we will have betrayed women's lives utterly, and we will have lost a part of ourselves that is precious and rare on this earth. So, it's kind of a bit of a conundrum, right? Because he's acknowledging that a lot of male identity is based in action, that men are not human beings, they are human doings. And rather than looking at that and saying, oh, this is a form of male objectification, or I suppose you could say male subjectification, right? That they're a thing done to others, they're a thing inflicted, they're a thing that has no inherent objective value, no inherent objective meaning or purpose. Literally, it's nothing but its utility, and the moment it has no utility, it's thrown away like an old broken tool. He doesn't view it in that way because he has no sympathy towards men because he thinks that all men are rapists like him. So, he's saying, well, we need to... He's making it about selfhood, right? But the reason for that selfhood is because of its utility towards women. So he's dressing it up as though he is trying to salvage the thing that is objective about a person's selfhood, right? The man that asserts his existence and says, A is A, and I'm entitled to my existence, and you can't fucking tell me otherwise. He can't acknowledge that. That can't be said, right? Only Ayn Rand said that. Nobody else, right? For as much as people want to shit on Ayn Rand, that's one thing she contributed that, like, nobody else has the balls to say. That, like, A is A, and I'm entitled to existence, and don't fucking tell me what to do. I'll do what I want to do. Fuck you. And, like, that's such a transgressive and important thing to say, that there's virtue in selfishness, that, like, I'll white knight for her forever. It's so important, and it's something that just people don't get because it's so contrary to how, I guess, we're conditioned, but also how we are. It's going to take a lot of work for that to be what's understood. But he's pretending that that's what he's offering men. Yet instead, he has to immediately package into it this utility toward women, which means he's just another person who wants to reduce men to human doings, to take them as tools and to use them up and to fucking throw them away when he's done with them. And that's what I think of this. That's what I think of John Stoltenberg. That's what I think of what he's said here. So yeah, the rest of this is just about the essays. Most of these look like they're adapted from speeches he's given. And he has his notes. So I don't know. There's definitely more detail I could have gone into, particularly in part 3, I think. But I think so much of that requires like an exhaustive knowledge of like porn, and it just I don't know, like I'm not really into porn that much. I see it as like so like obviously like inconsequential. And I think that largely it's a discussion about addiction, such that the discussion of porn is like largely uninteresting and non-unique. It'd be more useful just to talk about addiction in general. But of course, him and Dworkin have found it to be extremely useful in constructing their narrative. But I don't know. So for next week, my plan is I'm going to review all of it. I'm going to kind of revisit some claims, and I want to see if there's anything just like glaring in here that like I totally missed. And then also that's the one where I've messaged some people to see if they're interested in hopping on. I don't expect them to like read this entire thing and to come to it book club style. But I do hope that anybody who hops on the stream that they've listened to some of this and have a few thoughts about what's been discussed here. On my BitChute channel, you can find audiobooks of this that I've made. I will admit they're not very high quality. I've never really used that software very much, and I was kind of just trying to get them out there quickly so that there'd be enough time for people to kind of listen through to them. And then I noticed like, oh, I should have removed like the page numbers here or there. And I tried different methods of removing things, and it turned out more or less awkward in different points. Largely, though, I'd say they're all listenable, and you get the gist of it by listening through it. I think I chose a good robot voice that's like easy on the ears. I made it like a nice lower pitch so that if you speed it up, it's not going to hurt your ears. But the second one, since I Control F removed all the numbers, parts of it are very awkward. And the third one, about halfway through it, I noticed that I missed removing the part where it has his name and the page numbers again and again. So that gets a little bit tiresome. I think part 4, though, and part 1 sounded more or less okay. I don't know. But part 4 is a little bit awkward just because he has it broken out in this way where he labels the questions and the predictions and whatever. But I don't know, whatever. It's easy to find the PDF. There's like a Feminist archive that lets you download it. It's just a very slow download. But anyway, I've ranted enough. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. And I hope you guys all have a nice day. I'll probably have another stream at the usual time on my Thursday morning, which I think is most people's Wednesday afternoon to evening. And I'm not sure if there's any particular topic or theme. Oh, that's right. We said maybe we talk about weaves. I don't think I can do a whole weave stream. I don't think there's enough there to talk about weaves. But we'll find something. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe there'll be some funny weave-related stories. And of course, as usual, if there's any topic that you're interested in having discussed on those streams, on my Discord server, you can drop it in the library, and I try to get to all of them. Often, though, we just kind of talk about whatever the fuck we're talking about, and then I don't get to everything, but I like to at least acknowledge things in there and to kind of look them over. So anyway, everybody have a nice day. Keep it easy. Put the